introduction of our newest board member, Mr. Joe Rosenbaum. Mr. Rosenbaum was appointed to the California Board of Accountancy by Governor Newsom in May of 2022. He has been president at Rosenbaum and Company since 2011. He was a partner in Ernst & Young from 99 to 2010 and was previously a partner at both PricewaterhouseCoopers from 96 to 99 and Arthur Andersen from 1983 to 1999, enjoying assignments in both San Francisco, Los Angeles, Zurich, and The Hague. Wow. Mr. Rosenbaum was a member and chair of the Enforcement Advisory Committee at the CBA from 2012 to 2020. He is a member of the California Society of CPAs, and he earned his BS, Bachelor of Science in Accounting, an MBA, and a JD from Ohio State University. Welcome. At this time, before we take a roll call, the CBA has provided an opportunity for the public to participate via WebEx platform. When we take public comments, we will begin by taking public comments first from those in the room in Sacramento, and then we will ask to open up the lines for public comment. We've allotted 5 minutes for any public comment. With that, Ms. Reed, please take the roll call to establish a quorum.
Nancy Corrigan.
Nancy Corrigan, present.
Dan Jacobson.
Yes, present.
Christian Lauda.
Christian Lauda, present.
Luz Molina Lopez.
Luz Molina Lopez, present.
Dee Dee Owens.
Dee Dee Owens, present.
Ariel Pay.
Ariel Pay, present.
Joseph Rosenbaum.
Joe Rosenbaum, present.
Katrina Salazar.
Present.
Michael Savoy.
Michael Savoy is present.
Yen Tu.
Present.
Evangeline Ward.
Evangeline Ward, present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The CBA's mission is to protect consumers by ensuring only qualified licensees practice public accountancy in accordance with established professional standards. This mission is derived from the statutory requirement that protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the California Board of Accountancy in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Whenever the public protection is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. First order of business is, are there any public comments regarding items not on the agenda? Seeing none in the room, moderator, please open it up for any public comments from our audience.
Thank you. This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. If you've got a public comment, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right corner of your WebEx screen or behind the 3-dot other options, or you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon at the bottom of your WebEx screen. I'll give people a moment to locate that feature, and we are sharing instructions on the screen. And I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the WebEx Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Next item is the presentation from the California Society of Certified Public Accountants regarding entry in the accounting profession. Mr. Jason Fox, Vice President of Government Relations for the Cal Society of CPAs. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks for getting this situated. So first, thank you for the opportunity to present on this. Cal CPA has a whole team on the pipeline and diversity, equity, inclusion. Unfortunately, they're in a series of meetings this week talking about those things in Southern California. So for better or worse, you're stuck with me. But I have sat through and participated in enough conversations on this topic within Cal CPA, NASBA, AICPA, other state CPA societies. So I feel like I have a good kind of holistic view of this issue. So and I think it's very important and timely that this conversation came up at the last Board of Accountancy meeting, and that the board asked to come kind of provide some insights of what the profession is doing and what's going to happen out there. And certainly, I think there's a role for the regulator to have kind of some visibility on this. It is a conversation that is front of mind at almost every organization related to kind of the CPA world that I've been at the NASBA Western Regional meeting. There was a whole session on pipeline conversation, and I know that those recordings were just shared out with the board, so I'd encourage you to contact the board staff, and they'll share it with you and listen. That's very informative. And so I steal some of the points from that and steal some from the AICPA. But again, I think the pipeline conversation certainly has a consumer protection component, because if there aren't enough CPAs to meet the market demands, that certainly is something that could be troublesome from a consumer protection standpoint. So I'm going to start by, if I can do this correctly, okay. So highlighting some current trends. So, some of these are specific to the CPA world, but some of these are outside of that. And, higher enrollment is declining, and accounting departments are a little bit insulated from that, but not entirely. So certainly less students are coming in. That's a lot of demographic shifts and things beyond that. And then particularly of concerning is related to the Cpa exam. And so if you look at it, the getting your degree in accounting is kind of the first, the entrance of that pipeline. But once you start going through the exam process, really that's when you're kind of very just starting to go down that pipeline. And when you start to see some dips in that space, that's when people start to get a little concerned and raise some questions. So I'm going to share some data points that kind of illustrate that. So these are pulled, so these are from the AICPA. The AICPA does a trends report every year or every couple of years. And so this is from the 2021 trends report that they just released a few months ago. So these are data points from that. And so that purple bar is bachelor's in accounting. The bluish teal bar is master's in accounting, and that green bar is kind of the combined there. And so, and again, the data point up there is you could look at there's almost a 7% drop in just undergrad enrollment broadly, and I think a lot of the projections I've seen that's going to increase significantly in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think a lot of that's demographic shifts. But then you look at that, from the accounting world. So certainly there's been a drop in about 3% to almost 8.5% from bachelor's and master's respectively. And so if the pool is shrinking, then there's the number of people that are going to, potentially select accounting as their path is going to shrink a little bit. And so when you take that and look at, okay, these are the folks that have completed theirs. This is the number of people that are sitting for the Cpa exam by year. So the first-time sitters. So this is the people that would have just graduated and taken that first section of the Cpa exam. And I think an important kind of trend here is that, so for a number of years, about half, 55 to 60% of those that got an accounting degree would actually go on and sit for the Cpa exam. They may go in other places, but 55 to 60% has been kind of the long track record. Recently, since 2018, that's dropped to 40%, and so that means less people are going to sit for the Cpa exam. And you can kind of see the drops there. The other part I'll just kind of highlight. So those spikes that you'll see there in 2010-ish, 2010 and 2016, those tend to coincide with when there's updates to the Cpa exam. And so there's a big change in 2011, big change in 2017. So candidates expedite and try to sit for the exam and get through there to sit through the version of the exam that they're familiar with and what they've studied with. And then there's a drop off because everyone kind of rushed through. But then there's usually kind of a bounce back. And so I think that what's caused this conversation to kind of spike or have it, increase a little bit over the last few years, we didn't get that bounce back that I think everyone had thought after the 2017 new Cpa exam. And certainly, COVID has, implications here, but I think, and that you see a little bit of that spike up in 2021, but I think it didn't increase as much as people had anticipated. And I think some of the data points I've seen, if you look at out years, the numbers aren't going up where they think they are. So a similar kind of data point here, but this is unique CPA exam sitters. So this is kind of like everyone that's in that pipeline. So they might be on their second or third exam, kind of in that space, and still you can see it matches with the first-time exam sitters. Let me switch to the next one. And the last data point here. So this is those that have completed the CPA exam. So all 4 parts of the CPA exam. And again, you see it tracks pretty significantly that there's dropping down. So less people are starting to come in to sit for the exam. Less people are going through the exam process, and less people are actually completing the exam. And so when we're all looking at this, and I say we from the profession, regulators, Aicpa, and NASBA, this is where the pipeline conversation is becoming a little bit troubling. What's happening here? What can we do to kind of address that? Are there issues from a regulator standpoint? How the profession is talking about it? What needs to be to change in that space? So, I think this is kind of it's going to require a collaborative response. There's a lot of different pieces that could impact that. So there's not a silver bullet to any of this. But again, I think there's roles for different aspects of that, from the profession standpoint, the state societies and the AICPA, the firms, CPA firms, employers, the academia, and what they're doing, how they're working with students, and certainly I think from NASBA and the regulator standpoint. So I'll highlight kind of what Cal CPA is doing and kind of the broader profession pieces here, and if there's any questions on that, certainly interrupt me, and I'll kind of go through some of these points. But I think the first part, a lot of it's changing how we talk about the profession. Some of the stuff I've heard is, the CPA used to be, a destination. I got my CPA and I've made it. But I think kind of reframing that and kind of looking at it, it's really the door opener to a lot of different things, and particularly kind of the entrepreneurship. I mean, you think of a lot of the CPA firms out there, they're small businesses, they're starting their own firm. And that's the kind of mentality that I think resonates with some of the younger demographics and generations. But so that's a story that needs to be told better about, what you could be doing to kind of be your own business owner, how you can work with new upstart companies. And then how the profession is growing and evolving. I think the CPA evolution, which is a whole other conversation, but that kind of ties into the CPAs don't just do tax and audit. I mean, there's ESG, environmental, kind of reporting. There's data analytics, IT governance. There's all sorts of different components that the CPA is involved with, serving different industries that might be more or less interesting, like I'm working for a CFO for a major sports team. Those are things that may not be up in front to a lot of folks that are considering the CPA as a career. And then kind of just highlighting how the CPA profession adds value and what it means to the market. The trust and integrity that's built into, knowing that you can invest in your 401k because there's a CPA, auditing those things. And, I mentioned ESG. Those are, you can directly point to like how you're making a difference in certain things. And I think from a younger generation kind of perspective, they want to know that they're making a difference, and understanding that the CPA has a role and can open opportunities. That I think is, again, important stories that need to be told better, and so we're trying to do that. And I think the second kind of group there is, I think it's certainly important. The pipeline is a diversity problem too. I don't want to say problem, but a challenge. I mean, you can't. They're commingled, and so if we're going to try to bring in more different, diverse, and people into the profession and keep them in the profession, that ties into the pipeline. How are we talking to different groups and schools and communities that may have limited exposure to what CPA is or how the accounting profession operates? And so we're kind of marrying those things together because you can't really separate them. And then certainly engaging with the schools. And, a lot of these, we're focusing on kind of community colleges because I think a lot of the four-year institutions, I mean, they have support systems and they have resources. Not all do, but certainly more so. But I think the community colleges in particular may not have some of the support systems in place. And so how can Cal CPA and the profession kind of help fill some of those gaps? And one of the things we used to have they're called campus ambassador programs, but essentially they're students at the school and accounting program that work with kind of exposing their colleagues, their peers in the program, talking about how to become a CPA, what they need to do, what CalCPA has, the networking opportunities, kind of rebranding that with kind of industry influencer program. And that kind of goes back to that first bullet point of how we talk about what CPAs do and the opportunities in that space. And then student support, again, we do, CalCPA gives, significant dollars of scholarships to individuals, and we're always looking for candidates. So if you know anybody that's, in this space, we have, a lot of our chapters have scholarship opportunities to help pay for, exam prep, books, anything that might be associated with the cost of becoming going through that whole licensure process. And again, trying to connect the CPAs and the firms that need the talent with the students that are looking and thinking about this and getting them engaged and excited and of what a career in public accounting might look like. And finally, so those are, again, that's just a snapshot of what we're doing. And there's a lot of stuff at the AICPA and other groups that are doing, state CPA societies as well. And so again, that's not all of it. That's just a piece of it, and there's certainly more things that we're going to continue to do. But we also try to collaborate with all those different stakeholders. So we have, with academia, we have an accounting educators committee. These are professors in different schools throughout California that are looking at, how can we support them? What do they need to do to understand, some of the challenges from the professor's perspective, particularly with CPA evolution. And again, I think the key bullet point here too is collaboration with the regulators, and this is the Board of Accountancy. I think we've had a very good relationship. We've done a lot of great programs. I know a lot of those have been ramped up recently, and so I think, small things like putting together videos that are very, user-friendly, understandable on what it requires to become a CPA. I mean, those are small things that are helpful because, we used to get all sorts of questions about, I don't know what this means. I'm looking at a very legal document, trying to figure it out, but trying to make it very accessible and rebrand that, I think, is certainly helpful. And then kind of when we're going together to talk to students and candidates, whether it's, somebody from the Board of Accounts say, here's what you need to do, and here's somebody from the profession saying, here's my path, and here's what I think is value and what I've gotten out of becoming a CPA. Those are helpful, and I'm glad we're doing that, and I'm, looking forward to continue to do more of those things. And I think some of the policy stuff, so the conversation this morning and legislation AB 298 to kind of, streamline and add flexibility to that licensure process. They're small changes, but I think they're going to make significant impacts as people kind of look through that process. And I know NASBA is going to be doing some data and research related to that, the exams, pipeline, trying to find out why somebody may have taken one part of the exam but hasn't scheduled another part of the exam, or why they're eligible to sit for the exam but they haven't scheduled for exam in a period of time. So trying to figure out what those issues are, and sometimes they're life things, sometimes maybe it's something with how the exam's scheduled to put together, and so I think the more data will be more helpful in trying to figure out some meaningful solutions in that space. And again, certainly I mentioned collaboration with the firms and other states. So we're not doing this in a silo here in California. We're sharing with other state CPA societies, and the AICPA has been very helpful in kind of pulling everyone together and having those conversations. But again, happy to answer any questions. I went through a lot there very, very quickly, but there was some questions at the last board meeting. I wanted the board to know at least that from a profession standpoint, we're doing what we can, because I think this is one of the biggest challenges facing the profession collectively over the next 2 years, to try to how to reshape some of that stuff in the pipeline.
Thank you. We'll open up for some questions, Ms. Tu.
Thank you, President Savoy. Mr. Fox, that was very comprehensive, and thank you for that report. I have a couple of comments. One is, in terms of the entry to the accountancy profession, and I love the fact that you're incorporating and marrying the DEI issues into it, in terms of this discussion from Cal CPA, so all these other organizations. Do you also have any data or any information showing that some of these students, one of the things I have heard is that they need to have some soft skills that need to be learned, because CPA, you guys are very much like need to have bedside manner, just like doctors, right?
Yeah.
Because you are interacting with the public very frequently. So I wonder if there is some discussion involved in that.
Yeah. One point really quickly too, on the AICPA Trends report, I pulled out some data points, but they have a lot of other data points that related to some of the D&I and kind of what the racial makeup looks like, and of an ethnic makeup in the profession and in the accounting program. So it's something to look at too from that standpoint. So on the soft skills, so Cal CPA, we have part of that campus ambassador, but now industry influencer group, is we pull those students together, and there's leadership development skills, beyond just, the technical stuff of learning what to become a CPA. Post-license, we continue to have a lot of continuing education related kind of like leadership skills and kind of how that development. We have a Leadership Institute program that's specific to like, okay, I'm a first year, second year in a firm, and I want to, grow, and here's the things I need to do. And we have a lot of we call YEP, Young Emerging Professionals, that are networking events specifically geared to those students, pull them together and kind of marrying them together with a more seasoned person in the profession. So there's a lot to there, but it's certainly, that's something that we've focused on, because it's not just being black and white, green eye shades in the profession, but there's a people component, and the more we kind of tie that into and explain that, in the pipeline, I think certainly helps.
Okay, I have a second point, and with the data that you provided, does it take into account? I know this is regarding entry level, but the trend in terms of the number of CPA, is it being affected by baby boomer retirement as well, or do you have data point on that arena?
That's a good question. I'm looking at Ms. Salazar, who's been in a number of these conversations, who might have any data points. I've seen some of the demographic shifts, just more broadly from academic enrollment, and there is going to be a big drop because, demographic shifts their generations are getting smaller. How that specifically relates to the CPA profession or not, I don't know. But like I said, I think there's a lot of factors that are poking at this pipeline thing and maybe causing people to fall out of the pipeline or run into obstacles. And so it's hard to point to one particular thing, but I think that's a demographic shift that is certainly one that needs to be considered. And so when you look at solutions, you have to look at different things. I mean, we can't go turn the clock back and have more children, but I think it's yeah. So I don't know if that helps answer the question or not, but.
Ms. Cruz.
I'm sorry, Mr. Savoy, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fox. This is a topic I am very, very interested in. I'm not a CPA, but I may have been when I was in college. Had I heard about, what this profession was all about, it may have piqued my interest back then. I was pretty decent in math. I am very interested in building the entry-level pipeline at the entry-level level. And so I do appreciate hearing you say that there is an interest in increasing the diversity of the profession. I am personally very invested in bringing more people from the BIPOC community, that's Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so I do appreciate the outreach that is done across the entire state of California, because we are a very diverse state, and I would like to see that reflected in our CPA population. A few of the ideas that come into my mind, like again, if I'm placing myself back when I was in college, in order to maybe have an introduction to the profession, I do agree with you that it is key to bring people in and show people what the profession is with a bit more of, you know, not so technical, not so jargon, not so scary stuff. Maybe bring them in and they'll come to know all of that eventually, but maybe hide it for a little bit in the beginning just so that you could grab them, you know? One of the other ideas I had was, I'm sure this information is available, but having a salary projection, for example, you know, it shows students the possibility of what their salary may be at an entry level, and then as they move on in their career, what the potential could be near the end. A lot of the people in the BIPOC community are building generational wealth, meaning their parents are you know, on the low end of an income spectrum, and if a student is, you know, has made it to college and is looking for a career, a rewarding career, this is a very difficult profession, you know, it's not at all easy. I think showing them the potential of generational wealth is also a big grab to get more people interested in this type of profession. And so that's my suggestion. And my one question has to do with some of the graphs that you were showing. There was quite a few of them had 2 peaks. And it was difficult to see the years, but I think it started in the 2000s. For example, that one, if you could go back to the blue, well, actually all of them show that first peak. Mm-hmm. That seems to be pretty steep rise, and I can't tell the years. Is that 2010 through, what's the first peak?
It's, yeah, 2010 and 2016 is the 2 peaks there.
So, thank you. My question is do we sort of have an understanding of what was happening at that time that did allow this rise? And can some of those practices, you know, sort of be brought back to help another rise? Yeah,
so it's that second bullet point there kind of speaks to that a little bit. And so part of it, I think maybe you know, are there other aspects of it? That's a good question. I don't know. I'll find out. But I think the big driving factor of that was when the exam changes, the uniform CPA exam changes, you know, you know, new content or how they test certain things. And so a lot of times, you know, students and candidates, I mean, they've been studying for one type of exam, and when they realize the exam might change, they rush to go sit for the exam and try to push through. And so they might have, you know, maybe they were planning to do it in 2011, but they're like, I can do it 2010. Let me get it done before the exam changes. So there's usually a big spike, and then you see the drop off where people, you know, that would have been taking that took it, you know, accelerated their exam sitting. So that's the biggest driving factor for those 2 spikes there. Yeah, and on your point on the diversity, I think that's the piece of, you know, trying to talk to schools and institutions and even high schools, you know, candidly, because if you don't start making those decisions early, you run out of time, right, to get whatever you need to do, or it becomes more challenging. But, you know, talking to those groups in, you know, socioeconomically challenged areas, or just they haven't had the exposure to what a CPA profession looks like, right? And so trying to provide that perspective. You know, the Center for Audit Quality, which is made up of AICPA and some other large firms, they've launched a program. It's called Accounting Plus, I believe. But it's geared towards promoting the profession to some of those underrepresented demographics, and they do kind of tie, like, this is what you expect your first year, and 3 years is what you expect to make, and here's how you can see your role in the firms. And so taking that kind of on the boots on the ground, though, certainly takes time and effort too.
Very good, very good. Yes, I can relate to, you know, being in 5th grade and having biology and chemistry grab me, and eventually that's what I ended up studying. So yeah, take it all the way over to elementary school. I think, you know, if you grab somebody at elementary school, they'll run with it.
Yeah, sorry, and not to belabor the point, but there was one of the bullet points was talking about adding accounting to the STEM designation. There was 2 pieces of federal legislation that would have added accounting to kind of the STEM, and the Cal CPA and the professions have supported those efforts. And part of that is when you're kind of under that STEM umbrella, it opens up a lot of dollars and financial resources to promoting to schools. And so nothing yet, but, you know, hopefully that helps open the door and more exposure in that space.
Just from my perspective, it would be interesting to know how many students know going into college what they want to do. I knew in high school I wanted to be an accountant. So this is grassroots. I mean, we need to go to the high schools because it'd be interesting to find out how many students make up their mind prior to entering college and then maybe change their mind to go accounting or out of accounting, and why. But if we don't get to these folks in high school, we may not get to them. Ms. Lottie.
Thank you, President Savoy. I have a couple of discussion points, one of which was mentioned and the other I don't believe was, so I'll start with the one you kind of mentioned. So you mentioned that the students who actually obtain an accounting degree, there is a 40%, I think, point that you mentioned who actually sit for the exam the first time. I was wondering, have we had a discussion about the preparation for the examination in colleges? Because from my experience, going through your education in your accounting classes in college is not sufficient enough to allow you to sit for the exam and pass. And most people can't pass unless you take a very thorough, extensive review course and then sit for the examination. So my question is there a discussion about how we can better incorporate the materials into the college curriculum accounting classes that would better prepare a student to sit for the exam right out of school and not really have to solely rely on taking a review course? That just made me think, your data point made me think that maybe if the college accounting curriculum was more comprehensive in the preparation for the exam, that perhaps more students would sit first time for the exam.
That's a great point, and I think that's part of some of the conversations of how to support the academic community, particularly with CPA evolution and then how the exams have changed pretty significantly in 2024. How to support those to be able to do that, and then I think part of it too is working with the firms, the profession, and kind of building their expectations that, hey, maybe you need to give your young first years the time they need to prepare and study for the exam. Build in those expectations and incentivize them to sit and study. And then I think from a CalCPA, certainly trying to help with the financial aspect of those. That's why a lot of our scholarship programs are geared towards helping pay for an exam prep course if you may not be able to afford that. And so you're right. Those are all kind of, like I said, factors and that require different solutions to kind of the broader aspect of it. Yeah.
Thank you. I had one more question. So we were talking about the younger generation, and something you said kind of made me think that we need to better understand the younger generation's goals and their career aspirations. Especially going through the pandemic, I think a lot of people have shifted their opinion about success and career goals in general. And this is probably not a popular point of conversation, but it's just known that as a CPA, excessive overtime is a required part of our profession in certain times of the year. And thinking about if the younger generation's priorities have shifted from what has existed in decades, they may not be incentivized to want to even enter the profession, knowing that that's just a regular, consistent part of the profession. So is there a discussion among firms to maybe increase headcount so that excessive hours aren't always required? Have conversations happened about these things? Because not only are career goals shifting, but also mental health has become a priority in society, or it's more prevalent to be talked about. And a lot of people may think that working excessive overtime may not be good for their mental health. Or I had a colleague who had to be out on stress leave because she started having panic attacks from having burnout. So I'm curious if these conversations have happened. I've had them among my peers, but I don't know if they're as prevalent in the executive branch of our profession.
Anecdotally, yes. Talking to some of our firm leaders, and I know there's a lot of other people here that are working in firm leadership too. That conversation was starting to happen pre-pandemic, and you're right. I think that's definitely exacerbated or it ramped up that conversation of how firms think about their employees, their talent, how they bring in folks, how they retain them. The good, successful firms are really rethinking some of that stuff. I mean, it's going to takes time to see how that works, but you're right. That's part of reshifting how the profession thinks about hiring people, how we, bring people in. It's gonna, like I said, that's why I had that one graph picture. It's like there's all these different entities have to be involved in that. So certainly the firms need to think about how they're treating their employees.
I mean, years ago, the firms I was associated with was very successful in having more people and telling everybody less overtime. But you're in a catch-22 now. There aren't enough resources out there to hire to do this with. So you can say the more people we bring in, the less overtime you're going to work. That's a reality, but they're just not available. And that's the spiral that we're in, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Ms. Owens?
I'll make this quick. It's just a question and just a recommendation. Does Cal CPA, the chapters, work with local non-for-profits that prepare people for their college careers, like the Boys and Girls Club, at least in Los Angeles, like South Central Scholars, just to basically talk about the profession and educate them, in that setting to potentially increase the number of candidates or increase folks that might be going into the profession in college, but also I know that was instrumental in me becoming just majoring in accounting and getting mine, but hearing that through those types of organizations.
We do, and we're always looking for more opportunities to do that. So we could certainly do that from a professional standpoint, but then when we can do that in coordination with the board too on certain events when it makes sense, I think that helps.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation and also the comments. Mr. Fox, has Cal CPA or AICPA considered maybe doing some more current surveys on how firms are managing? Because, you hit upon something I think is really important. It's sort of the rebranding and the perception. And sometimes us older CPAs are, not the best brand ambassadors because we grew up working a lot of overtime. But what I'm going to tell you is when I'm talking with smaller owners, there's just a diversity. I know there are firms that continue to work overtime, but I know lots of partners at firms and their staff work 55 hours, or they work, they get every other Friday off because they work 9-hour days. There's a word for that, I forget what it is. But there's a lot of creativity and flexibility that's changing the narrative. So is there a way to get the facts? Because you have to sort of tell the story, and I think that people considering the profession aren't really going to want anecdotes about how awesome it is, because it is awesome, and how things have changed, which I actually think they are changing or they have changed at a lot of firms. But that would be my request, is maybe to try to bolster Ms. Lada's kind of question with a little bit of data, because I think the shift is happened and is happening, and that's a really important story, I think, for our profession.
That's a good point. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can certainly see what we can have.
Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you. Just as a suggestion, as to something to communicate to the young people in high school, college, and perhaps elementary school. I as a non-accountant, didn't learn about what accountancy really was until much too late in life. I think I didn't get it. Someone with a slide rule and short hair. That was about it. And it wasn't until about 20 years ago that I dealt with forensic accounting and realized that CPAs are the keepers of the truth. And I think that that's a strong message to bring to these young people, that they're the keepers of the truth if they become a CPA. Michael had also, a presentation some years ago mentioned something that I didn't know. There's really not that much math involved other than arithmetic. And even I can push buttons on a calculator. And so it doesn't have to be the people in the math clubs. It can be the people in the sociology clubs, and bring in, I wouldn't call them soft skills. I think that they're important skills into the profession. So those are some ideas.
Mr. Pei.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. And I'd like to just add to the comments of my colleagues here, but maybe a consideration is maybe the repackaging of the word accountant, because I say that to the younger generation, to the XYZ and the Gen Zers is, growing up myself, I'm not a CPA. I come from corporate America and I own businesses. And I'll be honest, I thought accountants were in this room and they just looked at spreadsheets all day and they just locked themselves in and didn't come out and worked overtime. But now, when you look at my life now and look at how these young entrepreneurs that are involved in nonprofit, small businesses and mid-tier businesses, it's actually pretty cool now. I mean, for myself, it's actually very interesting now but back then in college, I didn't want to look at the numbers because it didn't look enjoying to me. But now when you look at these young business owners that are making a movement and making big differences and appeasing to the younger generation, I think maybe just a repackage of the presenting of the word of accounting is different now versus what it was 10 years ago. Thank you.
Some people, some big wigs need to put up some serious money and do some big advertising in this area. I mean, really, if they're trying to get more young people in this career, they need to go out and not only rebrand, but tell them what an accountant is. Do you know what your accountant? I mean, most people think they prepare taxes and that's it.
Yeah.
My daughters that are both auditors, they say they're accountants. Oh, they used to get in tax questions. Well, we're not tax people. Auditors, well, you work for the IRS? So there's an awful lot of knowledge out there that is exactly what it is each of us do, which may be far different than anybody ever imagined was an accountant. And again, we got to start early. Junior high school, high school. We can get some impressionable folks. Any other questions? I know we have to move on. One more comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just highlight back to Mr. Fox's comments about the opening the door. It used to be you have arrived, and now it's the opening the door. So I think that really echoes your comments. And I believe the AICPA has some profiles up on their website. And so if I can find that, I will share it with Ms. Bowers to see if she can communicate it out. But I think that effort has started. I think the awareness of everyone at this table, I think we all have social media accounts. I'm not extraordinarily active, but we could be posting, we could be doing outreach, and it isn't just the board staff that needs to do it. Everyone at the table has a voice and a unique perspective on how amazing this profession is. And so I guess I would challenge folks to try to use that for good.
Yeah, and commercials got to be during sporting events. I mean, things that people watch, whether it's baseball, basketball, golf. Where you get the biggest population watching things and the most impressions can be made. This is where money has to be spent to do it. Otherwise, I see these trends going in the wrong direction. I'm at the tail end of my career. It's not as important to me, except in the grand scheme of things, that there are just not enough people out there doing that. We need to do the work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you for all the comments. I took notes, and I know this will have our team watch it. And I just do want to echo, thank you to the board and the board staff for being, a willing and collaborative partner in a lot of this stuff in the past and then even going forward. So I think, I appreciate that because we all got to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is a discussion and possible action to recognize the mutual recognition agreement between the Institute of CPAs in Ireland and the U.S. International Qualifications Appraisal Board. Ms. Center, Chief Licensing Division.
Thank you. I really hate following that presentation. That was so engaging, and a mother of a high schooler who's currently looking at colleges and careers, an important conversation to have. But, you know, here I am to talk about Ireland. Okay. So this agenda item provides the board the opportunity to discuss the mutual recognition agreement, or what we refer to as the MRA, of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants in Ireland, or CPA Ireland. Staff are requesting your action to recognize the members as having satisfied California's uniform CPA examination requirement upon successfully completing the International Qualification Examination, or IQEX. The National Association of State Boards of Accountancy and the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants jointly established the International Qualifications Appraisal Board, or IQAB, because we need more acronyms, to act in eliminating barriers between the accounting profession of the United States and accounting professions of other countries. In order for a country to begin the MRA process, they must submit a formal request to IQAB to begin the evaluation process. That board then reviews and determines whether that accountancy body's examination, education, and experience requirements are substantially equivalent to that of the United States. They then recommend to NASBA's Board of Directors the feasibility of recognizing credentialed non-U.S. professionals. If found to be substantially equivalent, IQAB then negotiates an MRA, which goes before both NASBA and AICPA boards for approval. Each jurisdiction can then decide if they accept that MRA in part or in its entirety. The item indicates that a country must be sponsored by a state board of accountancy, who in turn submits a formal request to IQAB in order to begin the MRA process. That information is incorrect, and the board item is being updated to remove that reference. Page 2 of the agenda item lists the accountancy bodies that the CBA currently recognizes. In May of this year, IQAB entered into a new MRA with CPA Ireland, which is your attachment 1. Should the CBA adopt a position to accept that MRA, this will allow members of CPA Ireland applying for licensure in California to satisfy the CPA exam requirements with passage of IQEX. As the CBA does not enter into reciprocity agreements, the applicant will continue to need to demonstrate successful completion of California's other licensing requirements. If the board adopts this recommendation, staff will send a letter to the chair of the board. A draft letter is included as attachment 3 of your item. Staff recommend that the board recognize members of CPA Ireland as having satisfied the examination requirement under Business and Professions Code section 5082.3 upon successful completion of the IQEX. I'll now turn it back over to President Savoy. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Center. So I understand that we're discussing just the examination requirement for Ireland. At what time would the other license requirements be evaluated?
These applicants would submit an application for licensing just like any other applicant. And at that time, they would provide evidence of meeting the PET exam, for example, which is an additional exam requirement. They would provide us with their experience requirements, and all of that would be reviewed at that time.
Mr. Rosenbaum.
Yeah, question. Is the IQEX exam, is that administered and offered here within the United States, or is this an exam that's taken outside the United States, in Ireland, for example?
I'm looking to Jason to see if he knows. I'm not 100% confident. I'm asking a friend. I know what exam section it is, but
Yeah, Jason Fox with the Conference Society of CPAs. I'm not 100% sure, but my understanding is it's essentially the foreign equivalent of the uniform CPA exam that's offered outside the U.S. But I'm not 100% sure if you can't take that in the U.S. Is kind of what you're pointing, yeah.
No, I was just reading some of the background material. I was confused because then it might also alter some of the numbers for the CPA exam.
they are not counted as taking the CPA exam, those that take IQEX.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
If they're taking that in lieu of, do we have the right information?
Well, just going back to the other agenda item, and if I'm not able to, yell at me, Patty. But so those data points that I shared were all sitters of the uniform CPA exam, foreign and domestic, of the uniform CPA exam, not IQEX.
Well, it appears we're being asked to take a vote. There's an action item on the table here. Do I have a motion from someone? Mr. Jacobson.
I move to adopt staff's recommendation on this.
Which is that the CBA is being asked to recognize members of CPA Ireland as having satisfied the CPA exam requirement upon successful completion of IQEX, whatever. There's no U in there, so I don't know how to read a Q. Is that your motion?
That is my motion, and I thought this was put together very well.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion or comments from Sacramento? Moderator, please open it up for any comments or questions before the vote from anybody else.
We've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. The other option is to raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon in your WebEx screen. And I see no requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A?
Yes, moderator. And as a question, is there anybody out there?
There are, yes.
There are. Thank you. That's good to know.
You're welcome.
All right, with that, Ms. Reed, let's take a vote.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Christian Lauda,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens,
Yes.
Ariel Pay,
Yes.
Joseph Rosenbaum,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Yen Tu,
Yes.
and Evangeline Ward.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sesh, for a great presentation. Let's moving along to item C. We have a report from the Department of Consumer Affairs. In presence is Mary Kate Cruz-Jones. If you will please give us an introduction about what role you play before you report. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Can everybody hear me? Great. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me an opportunity to provide the Department of Consumer Affairs update today. My name is Mary Kate Cruz-Jones, and I'm with the DCA's Executive Office. I would like to provide a few DCA updates and let you know about some recent personnel changes. But before I get started, I'd like to give you a little bit of background about myself. I joined the DCA Executive Office in July 2020, and in this current role, I perform data analysis and collection for all boards and bureaus and assist out board and bureau relations when they need help, like today. Before that time, I was the manager of the Discipline Coordination Unit at the Medical Board of California. And before that role, I was the assistant to the executive director and the board member liaison at the Medical Board of California, of course. I did want to share that I obtained my undergraduate degree from the University of California, Davis, and most recently, my master's degree in public policy and administration from Sacramento State University. Now, going back to the DCA update. So the governor recently signed Senate Bill 189 on June 30th, 2022, which reinstitutes through July 1, 2023, the remote meeting provisions of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act that were in place during the pandemic. These changes took effect immediately upon signing. Please be aware that DCA wants you to have the right meeting for the business of your board while still taking into consideration both costs and public participation. We are asking boards to still track the costs for the meetings, even those where there isn't travel, and when you're using WebEx as much as possible to allow the public to attend remotely, especially as COVID-19 numbers still continue to rise. DCA is still asking boards to complete the public meeting survey to track costs for both your board meetings in order to be able to compare costs for in-person and WebEx meetings, since this legislative change is only until July 1, 2023. We have distributed the surveys to all boards and bureaus and asked that they be completed within 30 days of each meeting that is being held. Should you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at DCA. Though legislation has passed allowing remote meetings, we are reminding boards to choose to hold in-person meetings of the safety measures, best practices, and recommendations for holding public meetings. When planning for upcoming meetings, please remember, all board and bureau members and staff are expected to follow the state and local public health guidelines that apply in the area where the meetings are held. Face coverings are strongly recommended for all board members and staff members. The California Department of Public Health strongly recommends that individuals continue to mask in indoor settings. Please post face covering guidance signage at your meetings, at the check-ins and entrance, so thank you, they look lovely. Vaccination and testing. So prior to meeting in person or at a remote location, members need to submit vaccination verification to DCA's Office of Human Resources or be subject to COVID-19 testing. So thank you all for your help and participation in that. DCA has also recently held a brown bag meeting with executive officers and bureau chiefs on July 5th, 2022, to roll out changes to DCA's regulation development and approval process. These changes were also discussed and approved by DCA's Executive Officer and Bureau Chief Cabinet. DCA shared documentation on the process and changes with all boards and bureaus. DCA is pleased to announce that Nicole Lay was hired on June 24th as the Deputy Director of DCA's Office of Administrative Services. With more than 20 years of state experience, Nicole has dedicated 10 of those years to DCA. Most recently, she served as the acting Deputy Director of the Office of Administrative Services, where she was responsible for overseeing business functions of human resources, fiscal operations, business, and the Business Services Office. Prior to this role, Nicole was Chief of the DCA Office of Human Resources. She also previously served at the Contractor State Licensing Board and the Department of Motor Vehicles. We are very excited to have her a part of our team, and we're very lucky. It's with great sadness, and I know that I reported this out in May, but I wanted to say it again, just to remind you all that there's been a lot of transition in board and bureau relations. So back in May, we did say goodbye to Carrie Holmes, who was the Deputy Director over Board and Bureau Relations. And then in June, we said bye to Brianna Miller. So I am here filling in their place. Thank you for having me. If you all have any questions related to Board and Bureau Relations, please feel free to reach out to us. We will be as responsive as possible and know that we are here for you with any questions that you may have. The department was recently advised that the State Controller's Office will have a slight delay in the processing and approval of travel expense claims, or TECs, until the end of July due to setting up of the new Year's budget in the fiscal system. We appreciate your patience with these claims. They'll be processed as quickly as possible once that system is up and running. DCA will be holding its summer board leadership meeting on July 26th. These quarterly meetings are attended by board presidents and vice presidents, executive officers, as well as DCA leaders to provide an opportunity to discuss important and emerging issues as a group. If you have any suggested agenda items for this upcoming meeting, please feel free to reach out to us at Board Member Relations. We'd be happy to hear those. And lastly, board members are required to complete the BMOT, or the Board Member Orientation, within 1 year of their appointment or reappointment. So for new members or newly appointed members, we hope that you'll join us for our last BMOT that we have this year, which is going to be on October 12th. It will be held via WebEx. You can sign up in the learning management system. If that feels really complicated, feel free to reach out to us at Board Member Relations and we'll get you squared away. So if you have any questions about that, let us know. As always, we're here to help. We want to be of service to you, and that will conclude my update. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Appreciate your being here. Thank you for your report. Next up is the report of the Vice President, Ms. Salazar.
Thank you, Chair Savoy. The item I have is 3A, which are the appointments and reappointments to the Enforcement Advisory Committee. So thank you, everyone. So this item is to recommend the reappointment of 2 members, that is Kathy A. Johnson, CPA, and Mernaz Nasi Raisan, CPA, to the Enforcement Advisory Committee. Earlier today, during our Enforcement Program Oversight Committee meeting, we had a very comprehensive review of what the EAC does by the chair, Doug Aguilera. But I will give you the shorthand for what this committee does. It reviews closed investigation files, provides technical guidance on open investigation, and participates in investigative hearings. In conducting my duties, I have conferred with our executive officer to verify that these 2 individuals have met the appropriate requirements for license renewal and have demonstrated the skills and knowledge to continue serving as members of the Enforcement Advisory Committee. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Kathy A. Johnson, CPA, and Mernaz Nasi Raisan, CPA, to the Enforcement Advisory Committee, effective August 1st, 2022 through July 31st, 2024. With that, that concludes my report. I return it back to President Savoy for a second.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other comments, questions, comments from the public in Sacramento? Moderator, please open up for any public comments from the public.
Thank you. I've opened up WebEx's Q&A feature, and to accommodate public comment, you can look for the text box behind the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand using the hand icon at the bottom of your WebEx screen. I see no request for public comment at this time.
Thank you. You can close it. Ms. Reed, call for the vote.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Christian Latta?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens?
Yes.
Ariel Pay?
Yes.
Joseph Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Yin Tu?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Before we move on to item 4, Ms. Powers.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment and put a plea out once again to all of our members as well as stakeholders. If you know of anyone who would be qualified and interested in serving on one of our advisory committees, I would just really ask that you connect with them, encourage them to contact me. At this time, we have 4 vacancies on our qualifications committee, and we have some upcoming retirements. So with that committee's especially, we could face issues where we're having a quorum and unable to hold those meetings. And so again, if you know of individuals, give them my name, give them my direct number. I have a great sales pitch when they contact me, and I tell them all of the benefits of serving on our committees, and so I'll help convince them to put those applications in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving along to item 4, the report of the Secretary Treasurer. Ms. Tu.
Thank you, President Savoy. The governor signed the budget on June 30th, 2022, and the CPA's budget authority for fiscal year 22-23 is finalized as $17,898,000. Of course, during the May revised augmentation, increased that fiscal year budget authority by $7,000, resulting in a fiscal budget of $18,084,000. These augmentations were in the categories of DCA, prorated, and personnel services. Next item is payback of the 10 million general fund loan remains scheduled for fiscal year 2023 to 2024. The CPA has been pursuing a fee increase in the initial licensing and the licensing renewal fees in order to improve the structural imbalance between the authorized expenditures and revenues. The fee increase rulemaking package has been approved by the Office of Administrative Law and was filed with the Secretary of State in July 19, just in time for our meeting. The outcome is increase in the initial licensing and licensing renewal fee to the statutory limit of $280, which is effective as of October 1st, 2022. Last item, state agency payment for the employment portion of retirement contribution was suspended for the past 2 fiscal years due to COVID pandemic. Per Assembly Bill 84, the unpaid amounts were expended at the end of fiscal year 2021-22. The CPA's portion is $764,000. The net effect of this measure will be detailed on the fund condition statement that will be presented at the September 2022 CPA meeting. This concludes my presentation as a Secretary and Treasurer's report. If you have any questions, staff or myself, most likely staff, will be able to answer your questions.
Any questions at this time? Thank you so much for that report. Moving ahead to the report of the Executive Officer. Item 5A is a presentation regarding the CBA's oversight of the Uniform Cpa Exam, Prometric testing facilities. Mr. Ibarra.
Thank you, President Savoy. I am in fact not Deanne Pierce, but Patrick Ibarra, Information and Planning Officer with the CBA. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide information and to seek interest from the CBA and committee members, that's all of you, to participate in oversight activities of the CPA exam at Prometric testing centers. The oversight activities assist in ensuring that Prometric testing centers are meeting specified requirements to safeguard the security of the CPA exam. The CBA has 2 programs that allow us to evaluate how Prometric test centers are administering the CPA exam. The first program is conducting site visits. Site visits allow the opportunity to visit selected centers and, by using the provided checklist, evaluate how testing center staff are adhering to security and other procedural requirements. Testing center staff are not informed in advance of the visit, and visits may take up to 30 minutes to complete. The second program, the Secret Shopper, consists of a prearranged visit through NASBA that allows a CBA representative to pose as an examination candidate. Participants observe the delivery of the CPA exam, the examination data, and the security administration of the examination. The visit may take 3 to 5 hours, and the identity of the secret shopper is not revealed to the Prometric test Center administrator. The individual is treated as any other candidate and is given the opportunity to view and experience firsthand the CPA exam testing experience. Attached to the agenda item is a response form for anyone who is interested in participating in either a site visit or in the Secret Shopper program. Those interested should complete the form and indicate the site or sites you are interested in, whether for a site visit or as a Secret Shopper. Staff would arrange to visit those locations that weren't selected by CBA and committee members. You can leave the form here with me today if it is ready, and I'll also have our Special Projects Analyst, Wayne Wilson, send a follow-up email with the form attached, and you can simply hit reply to return the completed form back to him. Once scheduled, you'll receive a packet of information containing all of the instructions needed for conducting a site visit or participating as a Secret Shopper. I believe a couple of staff, as well as some CBA members, have done site visits, and if I recall correctly, Mr. Franzella and Member Salazar have also served as Secret Shoppers. So if there are any questions regarding either of those programs, please let us or them know. That concludes my report, and I'll turn it back to President Savoy.
So the question is, a Secret Shopper, in order to kill 3 to 5 hours, I assume you're kind of taking the test. Is those results ever revealed to that individual? Because I'd be surprised or maybe enlightened, and about those of us that may have taken the exam back in the 80s or something, whether it's still, so just a comment. Ms. Salazar.
So if you take the test as a Secret Shopper, you will get a result if you passed. However, I was assured, one, it is top secret, but more importantly, they pull data of shoppers out of the testing data. So it doesn't pollute anything. No one knows. I think it goes into a shredder bin, but I don't know if that answers your question, but it is validating to know you can still pass a test. But I will say it has changed. It has changed a lot, and so it's worth doing. You can secret shop. You don't have to complete the whole test. You could take part of it or leave early. That's okay. They don't really tell you that. But if you only have 2 hours or an hour and a half, still a great experience. So I would encourage you.
Yeah, I'll think about that one. Next item is the report of the Administration Division. Mr. Barr.
Thank you, President Savoy. The report provides updates on the Administration, Information and Planning, and Information Technology units at the CBA. This will be a brief report. I just want to highlight a couple of items. In staffing updates, the CBA has filled 1 vacancy, so now it currently has 10 vacant positions. Staff has updated the questions in the Stakeholder Feedback Survey. In the second quarter of 2022, 73% of stakeholders responding to the survey reported that they were very satisfied or satisfied with the service they received from the CBA. In June, the CBA released the CBA Connect Feedback Survey, which will assist the CBA in making future enhancements to this system. We continue to make customer service a high priority. We will report on findings from this survey at a future CBA meeting. Staff continues its progress on the Business Modernization Pilot Project. On May 25th, the new online complaint submission system was launched. The next steps in this project are enhancing CBA Connect and building an enforcement case management system. That concludes my report, and I'll now turn it back to President Savoy, but we're happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Lopez.
Thank you, President Savoy. Mr. Ibarra, I'm just curious if any of the positions that are open within the CBA right now at staff, are they telecommuting positions? For example, is it necessary for the hiree to be in Sacramento? Can they be in other places in the state?
So with all of our positions, it's really on a case-by-case basis. So I would say there are positions listed that are vacant that would not be eligible for telework. That would include things like reception staff need to be in the office. If we have vacancies in our mailroom, they need to be in the office to open the mail. Same with our cashiering, we can't allow the processing of payments outside the office. But with all of our other positions and many listed on here, they would be eligible for telework. Then it just is a matter of operational needs, whether it's feasible to allow them to telework certain days, part-time or full-time. It would vary just depending on the position and the needs of the office.
Any other questions? Moving along. An update on the California Board of Accountancy's communications and outreach. Again, Mr. Ibarra, this is your area.
Hopefully you're not sick of my voice yet. So here's one more. Good afternoon. Oh, just before afternoon. Welcome, members. If you recall, I provided a demo of the refreshed CBA website in our last meeting. And since then, all of the specific page work for the site was completed, and the development site has been sent to DCA for review. We anticipate this to be completed in the upcoming weeks and the transition made to the new site shortly thereafter. Stay tuned for an update from us on when it's going live. The latest episode of the CBA's Accounting for California podcast is in the books, and it's up on the website. Our own Dominic Franzella, Chief of Enforcement, was the guest. He discussed many enforcement-related topics during the episode that licensees and even the general consumers should find interesting. And even though he doesn't want to hear his own voice, you all should, because it was a great episode. Oh, and breaking news. Cpa just published the Rise and Shine podcast featuring our own president, Michael Savoy. So give that a listen, because you better believe we will be sharing it everywhere that we can. CBA staff is hard at work preparing for our next virtual outreach event. Following the success of the event we held last October, which was targeted at applicants, this new outreach event will focus on licensees and topics relevant to them, such as the new CBA Connect online license renewal system, the importance of continuing education to maintaining high CPA standards, how to avoid enforcement actions, and more. The event is scheduled to take place in August, and promotional materials are being developed to secure registration soon. Now that the fiscal year 2021 to 22 has come to a close, the CBA is working on our annual report, as well as the CBA contribution to the DCA annual report. These are great opportunities to demonstrate all of the CPA's accomplishments of the last 12 months. CBA Executive Officer Patty Bowers has a featured interview in the Executive Director Spotlight section of NASBA's latest e-digital newsletter. The interview discusses the professional side of Ms. Bowers and her career path leading up to becoming the CBA Executive Officer, as well as her personal side, where she discusses family, living in Sacramento, and why she loves the area so much. We'll be sure to share the good news once the newsletter becomes available. The CBA social media pages continue growing, and CBA staff continues using it as an excellent tool to communicate with our stakeholders, both through our public posts and responding to messages that we receive on the pages privately. The month of June saw a large amount of new followers to our Twitter page, actually the largest in 18 months. The CBA continues to develop video content in an effort to inform and engage our audiences. Staff produced 2 new videos since our last meeting, which have been posted to the website and the CBA's social media pages. If you're not following us on social yet, you need to, because everything goes there. You'll remember that recently CBA Business Modernization Project Manager Suzanne Gracia offered a presentation to the board that provided a walkthrough of CBA Connect. Ms. Gracia followed that up by creating a video tutorial that is a valuable tool guiding licensees step by step through the process of creating an account in CBA Connect. She did a great job putting it together. It can be found on the licensees page of the CBA website, and I encourage you to give it a watch. The second video is the one I mentioned in the May meeting, titled The 4 E's of CPA Licensure. I could describe it to you, but I thought it would be much more fun for you to see it yourselves. So without any further ado, I present to you the 4 E's. And yes, it is okay to chuckle when you see me in a wig.
I've made up my mind. I want to become a CPA. Great choice. There are plenty of job opportunities with good pay available once you obtain that CPA license. Well, what exactly do you have to do to get a CPA license? Well, the CBA will make that as easy to understand as possible. So, in this CPA exam, right? That's right. First, you must have earned at least a bachelor's degree and at least 24 semester units of accounting courses and another 24 units of business-related courses. Once you accomplish this, you're ready to apply to take the CPA exam. And now, you can apply even before your degree has been conferred, as long as you are currently enrolled in the coursework required and within 180 days of completing it. There are more education requirements for licensure, but we'll get to those a little later. You want to take the second E?
Examination. The CPA exam, computer-based test, 4 sections. Auditing and access. Business environment. Financial accounting.
Quality here is obviously not as good as we'd hoped.
Yeah, I promise that video plays better elsewhere. We'll share it out again so you guys can see it. And we have, like I said, we've shared it on social media. We plan on sharing it again. I promise it's funny. It's worth the watch. Give it a shot. Yeah. So anyway, I'd like to thank Bryce Penny, television specialist from DCA's Office of Public Affairs, for help producing this video. We're very pleased with how it turned out, despite how it played right now. Don't judge it by that. It's already been viewed more than 300 times since it was posted on June 21st, and it was even featured in DCA's monthly Did You Know newsletter as an example for other boards and bureaus of the quality work that DCA can produce. We plan to continue pursuing opportunities for video content like this that will inform, engage, and hopefully entertain our audiences. That concludes my presentation on this agenda item. I'll now turn it back over to President Savoy.
Thank you so much. Any comments, questions? I think you guys are doing a great job. I'll help out wherever I can. It's a lot of fun. And don't be afraid to get involved. The staff prepares you well in advance. So they do know the questions in advance. So it's not like spontaneous answers. So it was a good experience. I even listened to it myself yesterday and was quite impressed. So, okay, let's pull a few items forward so we have time before my lunch is ready. Let's go with item number 8, the Enforcement Advisory Committee report. Mr. Aguilera.
Good morning. My name is Doug Aguilera, and I am the Enforcement Advisory Committee Chair. I will be presenting the next 2 items, and I will begin with CBA item 8A1, report of the July 7th, 2022 Enforcement Advisory Committee meeting. I would like to thank CBA Vice President Ms. Salazar for attending the EAC meeting and providing an update on CBA activities. Thank you. We enjoyed having you there. At the meeting, members reviewed 60 case files. The case files included open and closed investigative files, and members provided valuable insight and feedback to assist staff with the next steps in the investigative process. The EAC also held 3 investigative hearings in a hybrid format, with the licensee participating via WebEx and the panel members participating in person at the CBA office. Our next EAC meeting will be held on October 6th, 2022. Before I move on to my next item, I would be happy to answer any questions CBA members or members of the public may have. Moving on to CBA item 8A2, which is the approval of the 2023 Enforcement Advisory Committee meeting dates. EAC members approved the proposed 2023 EAC meeting dates at the July 7th, 2022 EAC meeting. The EAC recommends that the CBA adopt or modify the proposed 2023 EAC meeting dates. That concludes my presentation. I will now turn it back over to President Savoy, and I'm happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Aguilera. We are asked to adopt these dates. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Do I have a second? Any comments from the public in Sacramento? Moderator, any public comments from the other public?
We've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx for public comment. The other option is that you may raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon at the bottom of your WebEx screen. And I see no request for public comment.
Thank you. Ms. Reed, call for the vote.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Christian Lotta?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens?
Yes.
Ariel Pay?
Yes.
Joseph Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Yen Tu?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Item B, there is no report. Item C, report on the Peer Review Oversight Committee. Mr. DeLizer.
I guess it is afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Jeff DeLizer. I am the chair of the CBA's Peer Review Oversight Committee. A little background on myself, they gave me a lot of leeway to background, so we'll avoid sports teams and stuff like that, but I'll just focus on I've held a CPA license in California for 16 years. I also hold a CPA license in Nevada, where I began my career in public accounting in '93. I've served as a member of the Peer Review Oversight Committee in various capacities, most recently as its chair for almost 9 years now. I've also had the privilege of serving on other CBA committees, such as 8 years with the Enforcement Advisory Committee and a brief year with the Mobility Stakeholders Group. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the CBA the opportunity to discuss and approve the draft 2022 Peer Review Oversight Committee Procedures Manual. I'd like to begin by thanking my fellow PROC members and CBA staff for their dedication and hard work on the Peer Review Oversight Committee Procedure Manual. As some background, the AICPA Peer Review Program is the sole CBA recognized peer review program provider. The AICPA oversees the program, and the peer reviews are administered by an administering entity, and for California, the administering entity is the California Society, CalCPA. CalCPA is responsible for ensuring that peer reviews are performed in accordance with the AICPA standards, the standards for performing and reporting on peer reviews issued by them. The PROC created the Peer Review Oversight Committee Procedures Manual and Checklist to assist in their oversight of the AICPA's program and the administration of that program by the CalCPA. At its May 22 meeting, the PROC approved amendments to the Peer Review Oversight Committee Procedures Manual, inclusive of amendments to the various checklists contained within that manual. A full list of the changes can be found on pages 2 through 4 of this agenda item in your materials. The most significant changes to the procedures include reviewing peer review reports of firms with corrective actions and firms that have been dropped or terminated from the peer review program during the administrative site visit to the CalCPA, reviewing documents and other information provided by the peer review program provider to firms demonstrating that communication to the firms is clear. Specificity, I'm not sure who added that word to my talking points, regarding the statistical monitoring and reporting data to be collected and analyzed. And the consolidation of 4 previous administrative site visit checklists into one. This was a large project. The new checklist has been updated, and it reflects the new automated process that is now performed by Prima, the software application from the AICPA. And then peer review provider checklist, which was formatted for accessibility to meet ADA requirements. The PROC recommends that the CBA approve its draft 2022 Peer Review Oversight Committee Procedures Manual and continue to provide our committee guidance concerning oversight activities. I'd like to turn the discussion on this back over to the President, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments? None. Great job.
All right, thank you.
They're asking us for a vote. that the CBA approve the draft.
On the draft.
It is a draft, but can I get a motion?
So move. So move.
Ms. Carian?
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or discussions from the board? Are there any questions or comments from the public in Sacramento? Moderator, any public comments from the public?
We've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment, or you may raise your hand by using the hand icon at the bottom of your WebEx screen. I see no request for public comment.
Thank you. Ms. Reed, call for the vote.
Nancy Corrigan? Yes. Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Christian Lotta?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens?
Yes.
Errol Pay?
Yes.
Joseph Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Yin Tu?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. DeLizer, not only for your presentation, but for the extensive work that I know has gone into this report. So thank you really so much. Mr. Franzella, can we get you in before lunch? Thank you.
Michael, my bladder requires that I step out right now. So I see no report. I see no vote coming up. So here we go. Sorry for mentioning the word bladder.
You can always get up and leave if you wish. No approval is required.
Would you like to proceed?
Dominic.
All right. Thank you, President Savoy. Good afternoon, members. So the activity report before you today is for the near full fiscal year of 2021, 22, so 11 months of the data. So beginning first with complaints, through those 11 months, the board had received just over 3,300 complaints. I will report that we have started collecting and finalizing the year-end data, and that number is going to be over 4,400 for the full fiscal year of complaints received. And at the bottom of page 1, this is a newer graph that provides some comparison of the total complaints received as of the same 11-month reporting period of the prior 3 fiscal years. And it includes both internal and external complaints. And you'll notice that when we compare the prior 2 fiscal years, we've seen a substantial increase, about 53% over 1920 and 33% over 2020, 2021. And we'll actually end up finishing out in total about a 62% increase in total number of complaints compared to the prior fiscal year. So on page 2, members will see the graph, a much more abbreviated graph of the top 3 complaints received for each fiscal year, including the total number of percentage associated with those complaints as it would be for the whole picture. Moving on to investigations and investigations pending on pages, beginning on page 3. As of May 31, staff had closed just over 2,800 cases, with 98% closed within 1 year. And as of June 30th, staff had actually closed 3,100 cases. I'd like to address a quick typo issue in the investigations pending statistics, specifically in the same category for 1920 and 2021 for the area of 12 to 24 months. There was 2 typos there. Instead of 32 for 1920, it should be 47. And for 2020, 2021, it should be 33. So the numbers will actually add out now, as opposed to what's not occurring in the present table. There has been a significant increase over where we were when we closed out fiscal year 2020, 2021. However, that is due largely in part to the influx of the overall number of complaints. So as of those 11 months, we had just over 1,300 cases in our pending inventory. However, you'll see that the aged cases are considerably lower, and 24 months and older is at 2. And for members who have been on the board for a while, you can recall that number was probably like 114 at one point, and maybe even higher. So we've done a considerable amount of work to maintain that number at a very low rate. Moving on to discipline-related information on page 4, looking first at the AG referrals. The CBA referred 29 matters to the AG and has filed 23 pleadings, with the majority of those pleadings being accusations. We had 33 matters pending at the AG's office. And lastly, the board had taken action on 31 disciplinary matters, with the vast majority being stipulations. Moving over to page 5 in citations, the CBA had issued just over 430 citations, with 70% of those being for the 20 and 12 requirement. And we had received 68 citation and fine appeals during this period. So jumping over to the next page on unlicensed activity, page 6. So through those 11 months, this is where we see a lot of the significant spike in the complaint intake, or the complaints received, sorry. And we had received just over 1,460 complaints in the unlicensed activity environment, which represents a near 1,000% increase over 1920, and a near 200% increase over the 2021, and those were for full fiscal year data, so this has been a significant area of increase. But I would like to note the vast majority of those 1,461 is from one individual complainant who's filed just over about 90% of those cases with the board. And lastly, on probation monitoring, on page 7, total number of probationers was 120, and we had identified 66 probation violations, with the vast majority being cost reimbursement and failing to submit quarterly written reports. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to discussion to President Savoy, and I'll do my best to answer any members' questions.
Thank you, Mr. Franzella. Any questions? Ms. Ward.
I do have a question. I just want to make sure I'm not assuming related to the other board I used to serve on. Thank you for the information first. Thank you so much. Can you please explain the internal and external? I want to make sure I'm just making up my own thoughts about that.
Absolutely. So probably easiest is internal is any CBA program, whether or not it's the licensing division, enforcement division, potentially one of the board's committees who has, we've self-generated those particular complaints. External would be consumer complaints, SEC, PCAOB violations, complaints from professional societies, law enforcement, and the like.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Franzella. I'm curious about this unlicensed activity complaints, 93% of them coming from one complainant. I'm sure there's a good story there. Are these all for just a variety of CPAs that this person is complaining about? Or is it one CPA firm?
So I'll be very cautious in how far I'll be able to answer that particular question. But I think as we noted in the report, it's the complaints primarily involve individuals that do not have an active CPA license issued in California, holding out as CPAs, potentially holding out as CPAs, or using that designation. And I want to caution what that designation may mean, because it's certified public accountant here, but CPA is not restricted to that. There could be chartered professional accountants, other types of designations that other countries may use, and they may be holding out on social media in such a way that one could presume that might be a CPA from California. So we have a high volume of cases kind of in that bucket that we are working.
Mm-hmm. And I believe this individual who is submitting 93% of these cases has become active just recently, because the number of unlicensed activity, or the percentage based on your report on page 2, is way higher. It's 44% of unlicensed activity makes up the total complaints, whereas that category doesn't even come into the top 3 for the previous 2 fiscal years. So this person is suddenly being very active in submitting these complaints just this fiscal year.
It would definitely appear a large volume this year. If you even go back last year, you know, if you go 1920, we had 142, and then starting in 2020, 2021 is where we started to see an uptick, and then obviously we saw a substantial growth in this past fiscal year. So yes, you're seeing a larger volume from this complaint.
Well, the numbers are shocking and concerning, and I just, as I understand the caution, I just feel anybody looking at these numbers would probably freak out. So yeah, I just.
So I would like to caution members, complaints don't necessarily, you can't draw a conclusion from the complaint. Just because somebody files a complaint doesn't necessarily mean that that activity in fact occurred. So while there might be 1,461 unlicensed activity complaints, which would immediately draw your attention to, we have a significant problem in the area of unlicensed activity, I think that'd be, I'd be remiss to say that's a good, conclusion to draw. You're going to want to watch the numbers kind of more as they fold out in the outcomes area. If you're not seeing a large volume of citations that match that, or potentially other types of enforcement action, then either likely there was potentially no violation, or the violation got corrected. There's a whole host of other things, but I don't want members to think that all of a sudden there's this massive amount of unlicensed activity that was either unregulated before, unknown before. Just because somebody files a complaint doesn't mean an actual violation occurred.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. My last point, sorry, is so earlier this morning we were talking about closing, or the status of closing complaints, which means it was for various reasons. I'm curious if that type of data can be included in your report moving forward. I'd be curious to see how many of the complaints received actually are closed because of whatever reason, not insufficient data, or some of the other reasons for that closed category.
So we do provide information on the number of complaints closed in relation to what's going on in a particular year. I don't think we'd really be in a position to explain to you why, you know, in terms of there was 2,000 cases that were insufficient evidence versus mitigation and so on. We have to keep that relatively generic, but we do try to provide you at least a running total in that fiscal year of how many cases are closing. And I think for this past fiscal year we closed, and when we say closed, that means they didn't result in a citation and or a formal discipline of some sort. So closed means we either found no violation, it was complied with, there was mitigating factors, and I think we closed something in the neighborhood of just over 3,100 cases last year. So we could provide it in a larger category, just not broken down into those particular areas.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosenbaum.
Yeah, I appreciate that maybe you can't comment on ongoing investigation of this particular allegation of unlicensed activity, but is it going to be, does this indicate there are going to be 1,400 individual investigations, or is the analysis going to be surrounding the methodology that this individual used to identify these potential unlicensed activities?
So the answer is yes, it'll result in 1,461 open cases, and some and investigation into each one. And I will say we do our best to, when we see a trend in types of cases, and I won't just use this as an example, but it could be any type of cases, like when we had a high volume of failed peer reviews, or when we had a high volume of maybe DOL referrals, we become more familiar with how to investigate, and we can create certain kind of buckets where it helps us at an onset. We can identify certain characteristics of a case that might allow us to close it at a very early stage without potentially a lot of back and forth with the licensee or the party, because we're able to do sufficient research on the front end, where there might be another bucket where there's a little bit more, and then another bucket and it's progressive. So hopefully we can create enough an understanding of how to work the case, that while it's going to be, every case is going to be open, not everyone will require the same level of resources to work them.
I'm not at all saying that this is the case, but if there was ever a situation where a complainant was excessively submitting complaints that were unfounded, are there procedures to discourage them from that behavior?
No, and I would even caution that that's probably not the best course of action to deal with. We're always just better to take in the complaints, evaluate them on their merits to some extent, and disassociate ourselves from who the complainant is, so that we can look at it from a very kind of just a case-by-case basis and not worry ourselves with the fact that it's this particular complainant, and prejudge it before we've had a chance to look at it.
You're saying there's no serial complainants?
I'm saying I don't look at the complaint and the serial complainant.
Thank you. Any more questions of Mr. Franzel? Yes.
Just a quick clarifying question, and my apologies if I missed this. What is the difference between the practice without permit and the individuals without license complaint categories?
So the practice without permit, let me scroll to that just to make sure I'm working off the same thing. So practice without permit is generally licensees, actual CPAs who are either inactive, retired, delinquent, expired, potentially canceled. Whereas the individual without a CPA license is somebody we can't identify as ever having either been licensed in California or potentially licensed in another state or jurisdiction where mobility would provide them some latitude. So that would be more the truly unlicensed individual.
Any other questions? With that, we're going to break for lunch. Keep in mind we have a time certain petition hearing at 1:30, so please everybody get back a couple of minutes before. Good afternoon. Welcome back from lunch. We have a time certain 1:30 petition hearing. I just like to go around the room and get everybody on the boards on record as being here for quorum. Mr. Jacobson, will you start?
Dan Jacobson here.
Ariel Pay here.
Evangeline Ward here.
Michael Savoy.
Katrina Salazar.
Yen Tu.
Nancy Corrigan.
Joe Rosenbaum.
Luz Molina Lopez.
Jen Lotta.
Dee Dee Owens.
All right, we have an established quorum, Your Honor.
There we go. Is that better? Okay. This matter is being heard by the California Board of Accountancy, Department of Consumer Affairs, State of California. This is OAH case number 2022-050-591, board case number SI-2022-25. We have already had the board members identify themselves for the record, and there is a quorum. My name is Marcy Larson. I'm an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings, presiding over the matter this afternoon, sitting with the board. There is no court reporter available, so this matter is being audio recording. It's my understanding there's no objection from counsel. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
No objection from Mr. Kalani.
All right. So because we are audio recording this, you're going to see me peek at the recorder just now and then to make sure it hasn't turned off. If everybody can just make sure you're speaking clearly into your microphone, that will help as well. I would like to take the appearance of the Deputy Attorney General, please.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Deputy Attorney General Ted Durkar, that's spelled D-R-C-A-R.
And counsel for petitioner.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Cameron Coy, C-O-Y. I'm of counsel to Perkins Law Group and appearing here instead of Stephanie Sessions Perkins on behalf of Mr. Cabani.
And Mr. Cabani is seated next to you, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
All right. All right, so just briefly, I'm going to go over how the petition hearing is going to proceed this afternoon. This proceeding before the board is concerning the petition for reinstatement of the surrendered certificate. The board is concerned about the petitioner's rehabilitation since the time that his license was surrendered. The Deputy Attorney General will present the petition package into evidence and provide the board with a brief orientation of this matter. After that, petitioner will have an opportunity to present his case. Mr. Coy, you may give opening remarks and then question petitioner. I understand you also have an additional document that you'll be submitting into evidence as well. Please remember that, of course, the board has the benefit of the petition package, so you don't need to repeat what is in the petition package, but of course, if you would like to direct the board members' attention to documents in particular, you can do that as well. After petitioner is questioned by you, Mr. Coy, the Deputy Attorney General will have an opportunity to question him, and then I will ask the board members if they have any questions for him as well. After petitioner has submitted his evidence, then the Deputy Attorney General can give closing remarks, followed by petitioner providing closing remarks as well. The matter will then be submitted to the board. The board will go into closed session to deliberate concerning their decision. All right. During this proceeding, I cannot give any legal advice, but if anyone has any questions about the procedures, please let me know and I can answer the question. I will. All right. Anything before we get started? No?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Dakar, if you would please give an orientation and please address the petition package as well.
Yes, Your Honor, I will. Again, I am Deputy Attorney General Ted Durkar, and I appear in my capacity for this proceeding on behalf of the people of the state of California pursuant to Business and Professions Code Section 5115 and Government Code Section 11522 on the petition for reinstatement by Hamid Kabani, CPA, and also by his firm, Kabani and Company, Incorporated, a certified public accountancy corporation. So there are two petitioners in this proceeding. The first thing I would like to do is to mark for identification and offer into evidence as Exhibit 1 the original petition packet that you should all have with accompanying documents. The board members and the petitioner have been provided with a copy of the same set of this exhibit. The documents total 146 pages and are sequentially marked starting with HK-PET001. The notice of hearing in this matter is at page 129 in the packet. So having offered it, I would ask that it be marked and admitted.
Mr. Coy, any objection to the petition package?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 is admitted.
I would also like to have marked this one as Exhibit 2. It is receipt number 698432 from the Department of Consumer Affairs. This is a document that bears today's date, so it is a new document that is not part of Exhibit 1.
All right. Any objection to Exhibit 2?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 2 is admitted.
Your Honor, I'd like to now present a summary of the case.
Please do so.
Okay, and there is quite a lot of factual detail, so this is going to be a little bit longer than what I might present in response to a lot of petitions. Mr. Kabani received his CPA certificate in 1991, and his firm, Kabani and Company, received its Certified Public Accountancy Corporation certificate back in 1999. The license histories for both Mr. Kabani and his company are at pages 125 to 129 of your materials. The board's accusation against petitioners that led to their discipline, that begins at page 64 of your materials. It was filed in February 2019, and it alleged that the certificates of Mr. Kabani and Company were subject to discipline by this board because they had been disciplined by the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board and had lost their right to practice before that entity. I'll refer to that entity shorthand as the PCAOB. The accusation detailed that in January 2015, the PCAOB issued an order that permanently revoked Cabani and Company's PCAOB registration and permanently barred Mr. Cabani from being an associated person of a registered public accounting firm, and that also ordered Mr. Cabani to pay a $100,000 fine. Let me explain the term registration. Some of you may not be familiar with it as it relates to the PCAOB. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act requires that a public accounting firm register with the PCAOB in order to prepare or issue an audit report for a U.S. public company or broker-dealer, or play a substantial role in any such audit. So that's what registration is for. That is what one of the disciplinary findings by the PCAOB, that both petitioners lost those registration. Well, the company lost its registration, and he lost the right to work for such a company. The accusation noted that in 2017, the SEC issued an order sustaining the disciplinary action taken by the PCAOB. The SEC reviewed the PCAOB's order because of a challenge or appeal by the petitioners. And then there was a further level of review after the SEC sustained the PCAOB order. The petitioners took the case up to the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals denied the petition by Mr. Cabani and Cabani and Company. And let's see, so those are the three levels of review that occurred here. The accusation explained the circumstances, the misconduct that led to the discipline. In or about 2007, Cabani and Company did audits for 3 Delaware corporations that are public companies. In June 2008, the PCAOB notified Mr. Cabani that it would be inspecting Cabani and Company's audit records for these 3 companies. Cabani and Company found that the audit files had the kind of problems that could result in deficiency findings by the PCAOB. Cabani and Company personnel updated the audit files to correct the deficiencies that existed in those files. A PCAOB accounting standard number 3 allows information to be added to the audit work papers after the fact, after an audit is final, but only if the person adding the information notes his or her name, the date of the addition, and the reason for it. No information can be altered or deleted. However, Cabani and Company did not make notations about any of its changes. And when PCAOB staff performed its inspection in October 2008, PCAOB personnel were not informed that the audit files had been altered. In 2009, a former Cabani and Company employee filed a complaint about this with the PCAOB. That's how the PCAOB learned about the violations. Moving on now from the accusation, in October 2019, Mr. Cabani and Cabani and Company entered into a stipulated surrender agreement. That begins at page 56 of your packet. That stipulation or legal agreement is how the accusation was resolved. Both parties admitted the truth of all the charges and allegations in the accusation. They agreed to surrender their certificates and that the surrender would constitute the imposition of discipline. They agreed that any future bid for licensing would be heard as a petition for reinstatement. That's what brings us here today. And they agreed that if they are ever reinstated, they will be jointly and severably liable for $4,267 of board costs. The board's order that adopted this stipulation is at page 55 of your packet. That order became effective back on January 6th, 2020. So they have been revoked for about 2.5 years. In your packet, There are the 3 decisions by the federal agencies and courts, which I've mentioned already. These are final decisions that are the decided law of this case, and Mr. Cabani and Cabani and Company in their stipulation, in their stipulated surrender, admitted the facts. After the initial PCAOB decision and order, Mr. Cabani and Cabani and Company twice appealed to the SEC and then to the Court of Appeals for that judicial review. So I'm going to go through some significant findings that are in those decisions. Starting at page 71, you have the 2015 order of the PCAOB that imposed the discipline and the $100,000 fine. The PCAOB order explains that the disciplinary proceedings began in 2012. That's 10 years ago. The respondents in the case included Mr. Cabani, Cabani and Company, his partner, Mr. Deutschman, and another CPA with the firm, Mr. Kahn. There was an evidentiary hearing, and the hearing officer issued a decision in April 2014, which found all of the respondents, quote, participated in a widespread and resource-intensive effort over several weeks in 2008 to alter documents in the audit files of 3 issuers in an attempt to deceive PCAOB inspectors in an upcoming inspection, unquote. The decision found that Mr. Cabani and his partner, Mr. Deutschman's conduct was intentional and knowing. It was determined that the respondents violated PCAOB Rule 4006, which requires cooperation with board inspections, and Rule 3100, which requires compliance with audit standards. The auditing standard they did not comply with was auditing standard number 3. The petitioners and Mr. Deutschman altered and added work papers to the 3 public company audit files after the document completion deadlines and did not inform PCAOB of the changes. The decision revoked the firm's registration, and I mentioned before that Mr. Cabani was assessed a $100,000 penalty. Other penalties imposed were $35,000 on Mr. Deutschman and $20,000 on Mr. Kahn. All 4 respondents were also censured. Mr. Cabani, the firm, and Mr. Deutschman petitioned the PCAOB to review this administrative decision, and the PCAOB order starts at page 71. That's the PCAOB's decision that sustained the hearing officer's findings and sanctions. The PCAOB itself actually conducted a de novo review of the hearing officer's decision, meaning that it took a fresh look at the evidence. I'll direct your attention to some key parts of the order. At page 74, there's a passage I want to cover. This is towards the bottom of the page at page 74. In deciding that respondents had in fact engaged in a scheme to alter those files well after the relevant deadlines, the hearing officer marshaled several different sources of evidence in support of the findings of fact that underpin his findings of violation. The evidence demonstrates a course of misconduct, including intentionally resetting computer clocks to make documents appear to have been finalized before operative deadlines. That is troubling on its face. But the changing, conflicting, and patently incredible explanations for these document alterations offered by respondents throughout this proceeding accentuate the gravity of the misconduct and underscore how meritless respondents' arguments to the contrary now are. At page 75 of the decision, it's noted that Mr. Cabani and Mr. Deutschman were the firm's only 2 partners, so this was a small firm that was engaged in the misconduct. And Mr. Cabani was the engagement partner on all 3 audits that were inspected by the PCAOB. And then at page 75, there's another passage I'd like to read. It says, when the PCAOB inspectors disclosed to Mr. Cabani the list of companies whose audit files they would be receiving during their site visit. Kabani forwarded that list to Saeed and instructed him to focus his efforts on those companies in which the PCAOB was interested. In several emails sent contemporaneously by a junior staff member tasked with helping to manage the review, the effort is variously referred to as PCAOB Cleanup and Rayhan's PCAOB Cleaning Up. And then it says Mr. Kabani served as an engagement partner for all three, and that when confronted with this, they denied having any understanding of what the term PCAOB cleanup meant. At page 76 of the decision, it covers facts, including that the audit files presented to the PCAOB for inspection were materially different from the actual final audit files. For example, a management representation letter with an altered date had substantially different representations, and there were changes to schedules or trial balances where the final audit files showed that or revealed that more work needed to have been done in the first place. So they had corrected that after the fact, but were trying to hide that they had done that after the fact correction. Then at pages 76 to 77, straddling those pages, it says that forensic examination of electronic audit files revealed many post-deadline changes, and that the metadata had been modified in those electronic files, including resetting the computer's internal clock to try to make it look like the sign-off dates for edits were before the audit completion deadlines. The metadata identified Mr. Kabani as a computer user who had made such changes. At page 77, I direct your attention to the last sentence in section 2. This is towards the bottom of the page. It says, Kabani, Deutschman, and Kahn participated in the scheme to alter the work papers and to provide the altered work papers to the inspectors. Starting at page 78, the order examines and refutes defenses raised about the metadata in violation of PCAOB Audit Standard Number 3. The order states, quote, they have offered a number of different explanations for why the metadata evidence did not necessarily demonstrate intentional misconduct. Their arguments ranged from conflicting to unsupported to implausible, unquote. At pages 79 to 80, the order examines credibility issues for witnesses in that proceeding. The PCAOB adopted the hearing officer's findings about credibility. With regard to the whistleblower, Mr. Saeed, it was found that while there were concerns about his conduct and motives, but nevertheless found he was credible on major aspects of his testimony. Also, he took a risk in making his complaint, and his testimony on the key issues was consistent. On the other hand, the PCAOB and the hearing officer found that the respondents in that case, Mr. Kabani and Mr. Deutschman, were often not credible on issues pertaining to work paper alterations, including their claim not to recall important events, inconsistencies between their investigative and hearing testimony, and wholesale attempts to distance themselves from the evidence against them. At page 81 of the order, I'm sorry, I'll skip that. The decision upheld all of the sanctions recommended by the hearing officer. The rationale for the decision and for the discipline is provided at page 83, where it says that the misconduct is especially troubling and deserving of serious sanctions, where, as in this instance, the respondents went to considerable lengths to conceal their actions and might have been successful in deceiving the board if Mr. Saeed, the whistleblower, had not reported his concerns. And now I'll transition to the next decision that followed the PCAOB decision. This is the opinion by the SEC. Kabani and Company, Mr. Kabani and his partner Deutschman appealed the PCAOB PCAOB order up to the SEC. The SEC itself performed yet another de novo review, meaning that it took a fresh look at the facts and the evidence and didn't rely on or necessarily accept the PCAOB's findings of fact. In its decision, the SEC sustained the violation findings reached by the PCAOB and all of the discipline. It said, "We agree with the PCAOB that the hearing officer's findings are well supported by the evidence in the records and the law." That's at page 100. And then, let's see, I'd like to read a passage that's in the introduction of the SEC's order. This is at page 93. It's the second paragraph of the introduction to the SEC order. "We base our findings on our independent review of the record. That record shows that applicants added or falsified hundreds of audit documents, intentionally reset internal computer clocks to conceal that the alterations were made before applicable deadlines, and backdated their signatures on relevant work papers. We agree with the PCAOB that this evidence demonstrates a course of misconduct that is troubling on its face, and that applicants' changing, conflicting, and patently unbelievable testimony accentuates the gravity of the misconduct. As the PCAOB held, this misconduct is especially troubling and deserving of serious sanctions because applicants went to considerable lengths to conceal their actions. Substantial evidence thus establishes that applicants intentionally and knowingly violated the PCAOB's rules, and that PCAOB's imposition of sanctions for those violations was an appropriate remedy." At page 106, the SEC examined the sanctions that were imposed and noted that the SEC has the authority to change, reduce, or cancel the sanctions, and what they do is they consider the nature of the violation and any mitigating factors. The SEC sustained all the sanctions because it found that the parties engaged in an egregious attempt to deceive the PCAOB and might have succeeded if Mr. Saeed had not blown the whistle. The next proceeding that followed the SEC action was judicial review, and the appeal of the SEC order went to the Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals. That's the court that would review SEC findings. And the Ninth Circuit's memorandum of decision starts at page 120 of your packet. That was issued in August 2018. That decision was by a panel of 3 Ninth Circuit justices. They performed de novo review as well, meaning that they again took a fresh look at the evidence and reached their own decision as to the facts. They denied the petition, thereby sustaining the discipline imposed by the PCAOB, and sustained factual findings by the SEC, including the SEC's findings that petitioner had acted with knowledge of his wrongdoing. I direct your attention to page 121 of the packet for a significant portion of the court's finding. Numbered paragraph 1 says, "Substantial evidence supports the SEC's finding that petitioners violated PCAOB accounting standard number 3 with the requisite scienter, that means knowledge of wrongdoing. The indications of an attempted cover-up, the backdated sign-off dates, the altered metadata, and petitioner's failure during the inspection to disclose the changes made after the documentation completion deadlines all strongly support an inference of knowledge and intent." Next, I'd like to bring your attention to this board's decision and order at pages 42 to 53 of your materials. This is the decision on Mr. Kabani's first petition for reinstatement. So what we're here on today is a second petition for reinstatement by the petitioners, Mr. Kabani and Company, after their first petition a little over a year ago was denied. And this board's decision and order on that first petition for reinstatement, it's dated May 14th, 2021, and it became effective June 14th, 2021. And the board heard that petition at the March 2021 meeting. So some of you may recall these facts. We're here now about, 16 months later again. At page 51, this board's decision notes that although the misconduct occurred 13 years ago, the passage of time is not a mitigating factor because, quote, he has been vigorously contesting the PCAOB's findings for the vast majority of that time, unquote. And this board's decision also provides that although Mr. Cabani claimed to take full responsibility for his misconduct, he continued to dispute the PCAOB's findings that he engaged in intentional and knowing misconduct, quote, by suggesting that he had merely failed to supervise his staff appropriately. As such, his testimony lacks sincerity, true remorse, and complete acceptance of responsibility, unquote. The board found that Mr. Cabani failed to offer clear and convincing evidence that he is sufficiently rehabilitated to be reinstated, even on a probationary basis. That's at page 51, and that petitioners have not demonstrated that reinstatement of their certificates would be consistent with public interest, safety, and welfare. Next, I'll inventory the documents offered by the petitioners. So the petition by Mr. Cabani and Cabani and Company begins at page 9 of your packet. It defers all narrative answers to the attached letter from Mr. Cabani's counsel, Stephanie Sessions Perkins. That letter is dated March 21st of this year, and it begins at page 18 of your packet. It says that Mr. Cabani has, quote, made clear efforts to rehabilitate himself and reestablished his reputation, unquote. That's at page 19. Also at page 19, it says that Mr. Cabani is extremely remorseful for his past actions, poor decisions, and ultimate failing in leadership that led to the PCAOB order and the surrender of those licenses, and that he accepts complete responsibility for his conduct. The letter goes on to say that Mr. Cabani does not dispute the PCAOB's factual findings at all. And the letter explains Mr. Cabani's failings in this way, that his firm changed final audit documentation prior to inspection without documenting the changes and the basis for them, and that this is something that he and his firm both did. And the letter contends that Mr. Cabani, quote, failed to oversee and manage the process as he should have, thereby resulting in documentation and inspection compliance irregularities and failures. The responsibility for this rests with him alone, unquote. That's at page 20 of the letter. Page 21 notes that Mr. Cabani has now fully paid the $100,000 PCAOB fine. When we were here on the first petition for reinstatement, he was in the process of paying that fine, but he's now completed that. And so there's documentation of that full payment to the PCAOB. That's at pages 131 to 146 of your packet. It's an email from Assistant Chief Litigation Counsel at the SEC stating that the SEC obtained a judgment against Mr. Cabani based on this fine, and in February 2022, that's when Mr. Cabani completed payment. Pages 132 to 146 are the records showing all the payments made by Mr. Cabani, most of them in $5,000 increments. Mr. Cabani submitted paperwork showing that he completed 40 hours of continuing education, including a 4-hour ethics course in January 2021. All of this was completed prior to his previous petition, and it was submitted the last time as well. At pages 33 to 35 of your packet, there are 3 reference letters, one from Mr. Cabani's son, one from a CPA who was a longtime friend and who worked with Mr. Cabani in the 1980s, and one from a CPA who was supervised by Mr. Cabani for 8 years. In short, the three letters praise Mr. Cabani, but they do not address the misconduct at issue, and they don't mention that I saw any knowledge of rehabilitation efforts by Mr. Cabani since his revocation or surrender of license. And that completes my summary of the evidence in this large packet, and I'm prepared to ask Mr. Cabani some questions once he has testified, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Coy, do you wish to give any opening remarks?
Yes, I have a few brief remarks to open. Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Mr. Deputy Attorney General, we would like to thank you for your time here today and for the time that you spent in advance of today to review the very voluminous record that Mr. Dukar has done a good job of summarizing for you here this afternoon. Before you hear from Mr. Cabani, because I know that is critically important and really is the most important thing for you to consider today, in my estimation, I would just like to make a few brief highlights of this record. And I think I have 5 points. But before I get to that, I do just want to make a comment about Exhibit 2 that has been provided to you that was not part of the original packet. This is a receipt of payment by Mr. Cabani this afternoon when we arrived of the board's cost for investigations. If you look at page 60 of the packet, this is part of the stipulation and his agreement to pay $4,267.12, which is a reimbursement of the board's cost of investigation, and he has fully paid that this afternoon. And that's why we have Exhibit 2 here before you. The points I'd like to make are, first, although the revocation of the petitioner's licenses happened over 2.5 years ago, the misconduct at bottom in this happened about 14 years ago, in 2008. There have been no other allegations of any misconduct by Mr. Cabani in his nearly 30 years practicing as a CPA, either before that time or after that time. And as you may recall from the record, the PCAOB's investigation happened about 2015, and so there was some considerable period of time between 2008 when the misconduct occurred and the time that the order was issued by the PCAOB. It should also not be overlooked that Mr. Cabani and his firm, after the misconduct in 2008, passed the PCAOB's inspections and firm reviews twice, once in 2011 and once again in 2014 without any incident. And had the misconduct that occurred, and you'll hear from Mr. Cabani today that he doesn't dispute the misconduct and his involvement in that misconduct. But had that misconduct repeated itself after 2008, there likely would have been a discovery of that and an additional investigation by the PCAOB with respect to one or both of those later inspections, again, 2011 and 2014. But there were none with respect to those two inspections. Thirdly, as the record notes, Mr. Cabani was recognized in September 2006 by the Board of Accountancy, this board, for his 7 years of service on the Qualifications Committee. And I think some of you may even know and worked with Mr. Cabani with respect to his time serving on that committee. In addition, in October of 2002, Mr. Cabani was invited to join the AICPA's group of 100, or the G10 committee. Mr. Cabani, fourth, Mr. Cabani has incurred severe discipline as a result of the misconduct that he engaged in. When you consider not only the revocation of the licenses, his and his firms, which he stipulated to without dispute, and that has prevented him, obviously, since that time, since January of 2020, from engaging in any services that require a CPA license. So he hasn't been able to earn any compensation for rendering those kinds of services since that time. But he also, as Mr. Dakar has said, has fully paid the $100,000 civil penalty that the PCAOB imposed upon him as a result of their investigation as part of that order. And now he has now paid the reimbursement of costs to this board for its investigation with respect to the accusation that was leveled against him and his firm. Finally, and most important, you will find from Mr. Kibani's own remarks today that he fully accepts all of the findings of the PCAOB regarding his misconduct and believes the ordeal he has been through over the past 7+ years following the PCAOB's order in 2015, for which he is entirely responsible, has humbled him. Indeed, Mr. Kibani firmly believes that this experience has made him even more prepared and able to better render services as a CPA based upon that experience, and to do so in a highly ethical manner and consistent with all that is required of him by this board and by all applicable rules, standards, and regulations governing the practice of accountancy. And he would do this should this board grant his petition and his firm's petition for license reinstatement. Before any questioning of Mr. Kibani, he would like, with your permission, Your Honor, to make a brief statement himself that will then lead into the questioning. I won't have any questions on, if you call it direct, and I'll just defer to Mr. Dakar. So I'll just summarize in saying that based upon the record before this board and the expected testimony of Mr. Kibani, you will hear this afternoon, we would respectfully request that the board grant the petition for reinstatement as to both licenses under any conditions that the board might deem appropriate or necessary under the circumstances. And with that, if Mr. Kibani could make a few brief remarks.
Mr. Kibani, the first thing I need to do is swear you in, so please stand. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat. And please state and spell your name.
My full name is Abdul Hamid Kibani, ABDULHAMID KABANI.
All right, Mr. Kibani, if you would just make sure that you keep your voice up.
Okay.
And speak maybe a little more slowly than you're used to, especially when we read, we tend to read much faster than we speak. So just make sure that you read that nice and slowly so we can make sure we can understand you and hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I have written down this statement so I don't forget any of this stuff, so I can read. Do I have a permission to read this statement?
Yes.
Okay. Since this matter first came to light, starting with PCAOB in 2015, I have had a lot of time to reflect back on what happened, why it happened, and how it happened. And now I realize that I really have no excuse for any of that and accept full responsibility as the head of Kibani and Company for what occurred. And I'm very sorry for what happened. Frankly, I'm embarrassed at my conduct and how it poorly reflects not only on me personally, but importantly on the profession as well. I deeply regret not only my involvement in the misconduct, for I did personally, for what I failed to do in 2008, but I now also realize that continuing to challenge the PCAOB's findings at various levels, rather than accept them at the time they were issued, was wrong for me to do. I also realize that the consequences of my misconduct imposed by the PCAOB and my surrender of my license before this board were completely justified, and I accept those as well. I have spent a great deal of time since the hearing before this board in March last year on my original petition of reinstatement, further reflecting on my misconduct and my lack of fully acknowledging my actions in connection with that hearing before this board. I want to emphasize that this further reflection and thinking long and hard about all what happened, I believe has truly changed me and my way of looking at my journey through these past 7 years. I want you to know that I have known nothing but the world and life of CPA for nearly 30 years. And every day that I'm unable to practice as a CPA, I find myself more and more disappointed in myself and my actions. I genuinely understand the severity of my misconduct and appreciate fully the need to face that head on and accept responsibility for what I did. It is in this context and mindset that I really and truly feel I am in place now, where I can return to the practice of accounting and do everything I can to regain my reputation and the trust of everyone I interact with, and prove to this board and my clients, my friends, my family, and importantly to myself, that I'm worthy once again to be part of this great and honorable profession. It is for this reason I humbly come before you now for a second time and ask you to consider reinstatement of my CPA license and that of my company.
All right, thank you. Mr. Dakar, any questions for Mr. Kabani?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Kabani, are you still permanently barred from being an associated person of a public accounting firm that is registered with the PCAOB?
Yes, I am.
The letter from your attorney says that you don't dispute the facts of the underlying PCAOB matter.
Yes.
Do you now admit that the PCAOB's findings about your misconduct were all correct?
Yes, I don't dispute them anymore.
Did you intentionally violate PCAOB accounting rule number 3?
I don't dispute that anymore.
The letter from your attorney says that you take full responsibility for your actions in regards to the PCAOB inspection of your firm's audit files in 2008. What wrongdoing, in your own words, could you tell us, did you engage in with those 3 public company audit files?
It was a gross violation of AS3, which is the documentation standard of PCAOB, which required the file to be completed within 45 days. As you had mentioned in your statement, that even if there are some work paper which are added, it has to be signed and documented by the staff, so the person reviewing it know that when they were added. So number one, the files were changed. That means some documents might have were added, and there were no documentation on them when they were added. So this was a gross violation of AS3.
Were you also involved in changing metadata and backdating changes to make it look like they'd occurred before the deadline?
I do not dispute any of that either.
If you are reinstated and if your firm is reinstated, could you tell us what your practice and your firm's practice would consist of?
At this stage of my career, I do not envision to go back and do as much work as I used to do the public audit companies. I will restart, as I don't have any business right now, no firm, nothing, as I've been barred for the last 2.5 years. So I will start with tax practice, accounting, consulting, little bit of assurance, but no public, at this time I don't envision myself doing any public company audit.
So you don't envision doing public company accounting, but do you have any safeguards in mind or in place already that might prevent other forms of misconduct if you're practicing again as a CPA?
So first thing first is that I have realized what error I have committed and how gross and severe they were. So in light of that, I have now learned to respect the rules and regulation of the accounting. Second thing is to make sure that I have proper staff. When I hire staff, they are capable of conducting the work for which they are hired. There are various tiers of supervision by the qualified people. And before everything is approved, making sure that nothing is in violation of rules and regulation.
In what way would that differ from what any accountant would do? Are you saying that you would take even greater care?
Yes, even greater care. And first thing is that realization of the problem. So there was a problem, which I accept, and making sure that this problem does not happen. There is no intentions of doing that. There should never be any intent to commit any of that act again. That will be the most important. Second thing will be to accept the clients only you can do properly. Do not accept more than what you can chew. You can hire staff who are capable, who can assist you, but understanding that at the end of the day, it all comes to me to make sure whoever is done, whoever is reviewed, I have to make sure that my firm fully comply with all the rules and regulations.
Since the surrender of your license and your firm's license, it's been about 2.5 years since that became effective. Have you taken any particular steps to rehabilitate yourself, such as further education or volunteer work in the community?
I have done CPE course. Some of the certificates I have attached here in this petition. I've done ethics course also, and I have attached a certification of that. I keep myself up with the rules and regulations of the audit and tax and accounting and tax rules to making sure at least I'm up to speed, although I'm not practicing it, but just wanted to make sure that I'm up to speed with any changes which is happening in the rules and regulation.
Could you be a little more specific about that?
So any time there is a changes in any accounting rules which require a little bit more to do work as compared to previously, I wanted to make sure that I know what changes has taken place. So hopefully after this meeting, if I am allowed to work, it doesn't come down suddenly to me that it's overwhelming that I don't know what happened, and then I go up to speed. So I wanted to make sure that I'm up to speed with the rules and regulation and know what changes are taking place.
Thank you, Mr. Kabani. Your Honor, those are all the questions I have for him.
All right, I'm now going to ask our panel members, board members, if they have any questions, starting to my left with our president.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Kabani, last time you came before us, you took no responsibility, you blamed the actions on other people, and kind of kept that mantra. And obviously we didn't see remorse at the time and didn't take responsibility, so your petition was denied. Why the sudden change now?
Well, it gave me a time to reflect back on what I have done, especially last 1.5 years. Basically, since last 2.5 years, but especially last one year and 3 months or 1 and 6 months, whatever time has left since then, to understand that I was not taking full responsibility or I was not expressing my full responsibility to the board at that time. And I should have said in more clear terms that I accept everything said in the PCAOB judgment, and I committed the crime. I don't dispute any of the facts. So it's basically my own review of my own conduct which made me accept this fact.
In those 2.5 years, how have you supported yourself?
It has been tough, but my wife has her small company, and we live on her income. I am not able to do any other work. I don't know any other work other than accounting. I don't know IT or marketing or sales. So this is the only thing I know. So I have not done any business. I have no income for last 2.5 years. And that's why when the PCOB judgment was enforced through the SEC, I had a negotiation with the SEC, and they accepted that I pay $5,000 each month rather than pay $100,000. So it was SEC's idea that I pay in installment, because I didn't have that much money at one time.
So obviously your background is in accounting, auditing, high level. You talked about tax. What tax experience do you have that will enable you to earn money as a tax preparer or in that different arena?
Okay, so while we were doing the public company audits, my firm did some of the corporate taxes, those public companies. So I'm familiar with corporate tax, business tax. I'm familiar with individual tax. Obviously, I do my friends, my families. So I'm familiar with the tax, and I promise to learn more about it as I will do, but I feel that I have sufficient level of knowledge on the tax that I've done in the past tax returns without any problem.
Okay, thank you. No question.
No question.
Thank you. You also mentioned, I'm not sure if you answered Mr. Dekar's question regarding what have you done during this time in terms of rehabilitation. Are you still continuing your continuing education courses? Are you taking any of those courses?
Yes, so I am continuing doing that. Because continuing professional education is a basic thing which makes me comfortable to do any kind of work. I will definitely not take any work which I'm not proficient. So therefore, I'm continuing doing CPE.
All right, and that was Miss 2, correct? All right, if you could just, before you ask the question, just identify yourself so we have a record.
Yes, Nancy Corrigan, thank you. No questions.
Hi, Joe Rosenbaum. I just had a specific question about your personal responsibility and acceptance of your actions. In your petition on page 20, there's a highlighted section near the top. I don't know if you can refer to that.
Page 20. Okay.
Where it says you agree that you should never have allowed this to occur. But in this entire paragraph, it doesn't ever, you're never accepting any responsibility for personal actions that were alleged by the PCAOB. And this was submitted in June, last month. So I guess the question is, what responsibility do you take for the specific actions that the PCAOB found? Not only not completing the audit by the deadlines, but also the backdating of files and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what I stated, that whatever had been stated in PCAOB judgment, I take full responsibility, including my conduct or my lack of doing supervising or my lack of taking actions, my misconduct on different areas. I take full responsibility of everything what has been stated.
No, I'm charged. You've continued to say you take full responsibility, but I guess the question is, were you personally involved in some of the actions?
I don't dispute that. I agree with that.
So that's, again, my question. Whether you dispute it or not,
No, I don't dispute.
I understand that you don't dispute it. But you aren't taking responsibility. You are not going to admit that you personally were involved in some of these actions.
I'm agreeing with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Luz Molina. Thank you, Mr. Cabani, for being present today. Were the alterations to the work papers intentional?
Yes, they were.
Were you personally involved in those alterations, such as the pulling the dates and the clock back on the computers?
Yeah, I don't dispute that either. I probably I'm not explaining myself clearly. Yes, I take responsibility of that. I did.
Thank you. During the time period in 2007 and 2008, how many employees made up your firm?
Can you repeat that question?
The timing between 2007, which I understand is when the misconduct occurred, and through 2008, which is when the PCAOB performed their audits, how many people were employed by your firm?
About between 25 to 30.
Okay. Were your employees treated fairly and professionally?
I tried my best, to treat them fair.
Okay. One of the letters from your family members cites that my father is a force to be reckoned with. And so I do hope that the people who were employed under your care were in fact treated fairly and professionally.
That's always my goal, yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Christian Lara, you mentioned during the last 2 years what the impact was to your livelihood. Can you just give us details beyond that, since the initial PCAOB complaint was issued, what the impact has been over the years in addition to that?
Can you a little bit elaborate your question? So I did not understand clearly.
President Savoy kind of asked, or I believe it was him, who asked how you were making your living in the last 2 years, and you mentioned your wife is primarily the one who is providing the income for your family. Has that been the case beyond the last 2 years, or what has happened previous to that point, and what's been the impact for you and your family since all of these issues have occurred?
Okay, so until I surrendered my license, my firm was still was active. So at that time, I was still, making money through this firm. Since I surrendered my license, I no longer make any money to this date. So that's what I explained, that to the family income we are surviving.
My previous question was asked by President Savoy, so no further questions.
Dee Owens, just to make sure I'm following the questions, I'm getting a little bit confused by some of your responses, but did you intentionally direct your employees to clean up the 3 specific audit files?
Yes.
And did you do that on the basis of knowing that the inspection would find things that were inappropriate?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And what would you do if you were faced with that situation today?
So that's what the first thing in my mind was, accepting the fact that I committed a crime that was wrong, and its severity of that crime is such that it impacts not only myself, my clients, my firm, but the profession as well. It's a tarnish. And so in order for me to restart, first thing in my mind I have clarified myself is that I should never intentionally commit this kind of crime ever again. I should not allow anybody to do that if somebody is working under my supervision. And as I explained to Mr. Dakar, that I will take certain measures when I start my firm, and if I'm in position to hire employees at that level, then I will put different tiers of supervision where this kind of conduct is not allowed to happen.
I guess as a follow-up to that, I understand supervision and tiers of review, but there was an ethical choice you made to change those files.
Right.
What have you done over the last few years to address that?
So first thing is to accept the guilt and accept the charge wholeheartedly. There was one question that do you accept, and probably, as I said, I was not maybe clear. I do accept everything. I did committed the crime. I did committed those acts which were very bad and which were against the rules and regulation. I did commit those, and I will promise that I will never do again. So that was the very first step I took in my mind to rehabilitate myself. Second thing is that going beyond that, I keep myself educated and make sure that I'm, aware of all the ethics rules and follow all the rules wholeheartedly, not trying to cheat anyone or not trying to commit any forgery or adding any documents or break the rules.
I have no other questions.
All right, and to my right, just please identify yourself, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Dan Jacobson, and I have a few questions. On page 49 of the packet, there's it says that the K&C audit software program had malfunction prior to the inspection, and our audit staff had restored some of the files without properly documenting the issue. I want to focus on the malfunction for just a moment. Do you know if the audit software malfunction somehow made it so that the name, date of addition, and reason for addition were not included in the audit files?
Yes.
And how did the audit malfunction? What did the audit malfunction do, if you know, to cause the name, the date of addition, and the reason for the addition to not appear in the audit files?
So this problem happened in 2008, relating to the 3 files in 2008 particular period. At that time, our firm was moving from the hard copy files to the software. This was very new at that time for a smaller firm. Big firms were using that electronic paperless audit. A smaller firm were beginning to do that, and there was 1 or 2 software available. One of them very popular among small firms was called PPC by Thomson Reuters. The problem was that was not a network-based software. It was installed on each individual laptops of different people. So if some audit has 4 people will go with same software on their laptop. They will do different work on their laptops. At the end of the audit, they will combine all the work paper and put together as a one file. So there was an issue where those files started jamming, they will freeze and they will not open. The computer files, when you try to open it, import and open it, which audit staff has accumulated from different laptops and made as a one file. So when you try to open it, you could not do it. And that happened also when PCOB requested us the file. We submitted files to them, and then they came back and said, do you know that the software you provided us, it doesn't open the file anymore? So that was one of the malfunction there.
So this combining of different work done on different laptops, that and the jamming that caused, or that resulted in that process.
Right.
that made it so, is it that made it so that the name, date, and reason for addition did not appear in the audit files, or was it just that the audit files couldn't be opened?
So I just want to make clear that I'm no way trying to justify any of the act I did. What happened, we did it. But as your question pertains to this specific technical issue, so what happened in some of the cases, they could not open it. They went back to the PPC, the Thomson Reuters, and there is a chain of emails between PPC and my staff, which were provided to PCAOB. PCAOB asked them to redo the same thing. So let's say you cannot open this file. Let's take back those 4 laptops again and put together them again. So when you do that, it will take current date now instead of previous date. So some of the issues were that. I'm not saying that it was justified or any way, or that was all the problem. I'm just addressing your specific question.
When you say they, you're talking about Thomson Reuters?
Right.
And was the name of the changer to the or the additioner to the audit files, did that appear in these audit files where the date changed? It changed to the current date?
So what happened is that on the work paper, the person has their own name, but in the metadata, so remember this was a small firm.
Sure.
So anytime we will buy laptop, I'll go to Costco or somewhere, buy 2 laptops for new stuff, 3 laptops for other stuff. And it will all say Kabani, my name, because I will set it up, the program for them.
I see.
So all of them say Kabani. So it will say Kabani. And I would have done that too. It will say Kabani. Anybody will say it will say Kabani on the metadata. But on the work paper, it will say name of the person who has added that document.
All right. So in these situations, in the electronic form of the audit files, is it correct that it would have the name, your name, in those kind of situations, and the reason for the addition, but the date would be different?
Date will be different. In a lot of cases, we did not disclose the reasons. We just added the document, but we did not disclose because AS3 says that first process is that you have to finish assembling the file within 45 days after the issuance of report. They allow you 45 days, you can assemble it. After the 45 days, if you add anything, which it allows, it says you can do it, but you have to put your name, sign, and reason why you are doing it. So if somebody would have said that I did it because computer malfunction or something, I would not be here at this stage. So we did not disclose any of this, which was a big mistake and big crime, and gross violation of the conduct of the rules.
Thank you. A couple of other things. I think maybe I didn't hear you correctly. For a continuing education course, you said you took an ethics course? Ethics course, okay. I thought perhaps we had a different issue going on here. And the letters, there were 2 from each of your sons who, is that correct?
Last time,
one from each son?
No, so actually, I have a son who is an attorney, so I had presented his letter in first application, which was last year.
Okay.
This year, I presented my daughter, who's a doctor, her statement. So just wanted to give a personal touch that how they feel that I'm not a bad father or not a bad human being. It was error. Totally accept that it was a mistake, but I am not an animal or bad person.
Thank you.
Ariel Pay. Simple question, Mr. Cabani. What's the definition of integrity?
Integrity, you have to present the case on honesty based on the rules and regulation, and as they appear, the fact, you have to disclose it without hiding any facts.
Thank you.
Hi, Evangeline Ward. I just have a question. I'm just curious. I thank you for sharing your information, but I'm just curious. You said back the early part of the years, 20 to 25 employees. At that point, did any employee reach out to help you to say, hey, we can't do this, or we shouldn't do this, or what should we do? I'm just trying to get an idea of if you truly said, no, I'm doing it this way only, or did someone say, hey, we can do it this way, it would be okay?
Not really. It was basically, judgmental error on part of everybody, which was without any excuse, should not have been done.
All right, any additional questions from our board members? Mr. Descartes, any follow-up questions?
No, Your Honor.
Oh, one more, please.
I apologize, Your Honor, and it's Dan Jacobson. Just one more question. Were there any instances where the name or the date or the reasons for additions not included in audit files were caused by anything other than the Thomson Reuters software malfunction?
Yes, it was an effort to hide the stuff that they were added, and it was not disclosed.
Thank you.
Yeah. So whatever said in the PCAOB judgment is true.
All right, no further questions. Yes.
Clarify something you mentioned. You mentioned that you learned your lesson and you fully admit to the unethical changing of the date. And then just now you mentioned that it was a mistake. I just want to make sure that you still don't think it was a purely mistake or it was a intentional.
Yes, there was no mistake. It was all part of misconduct. Everything was wrongly done. I fully accept that it was a misconduct. Yeah.
All right, any additional questions?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Coy, any questions for Mr. Kamani?
No follow-up questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, if there's no additional questions, no further evidence, we can begin with closing remarks. And in closing remarks, Mr. Descartes.
Yes, Your Honor. I'd just like to remind the board members that it is the petitioner's obligation and burden of proof to establish by clear and convincing evidence that they're rehabilitated and that it would be in the public interest to restore their licenses. This board should be concerned that dishonesty was at the core of Mr. Kabani's misconduct, and that for many years, rather than deal with the consequences of his misconduct, in the first place, he orchestrated a program within his firm to cover up the errors and insufficiencies in the audit work papers. And then following that for many years, attempted to deceive investigators, then fight the PCAOB's well-supported findings. And so that continued pattern of behavior does raise a concern that probation may not be sufficient protection. That's for you to determine whether probation would provide sufficient protection. The passage of time since 2008 would be mitigating if there had been contrition earlier. But as late as last year, there was still a noted lack of contrition and true acceptance of responsibility. Mr. Kabani mounted a years-long campaign in which he stubbornly denied actual responsibility. And that legal campaign did reflect resistance to lawful authority. Rehabilitation can't begin until a person admits the extent of one's wrongdoing. Has that occurred? Perhaps it has as of today, but only after his first petition was denied a year ago. If there is full contrition, it is new, and you will have to answer the question of whether that's enough to meet his burden of demonstrating rehabilitation by clear and convincing evidence. And ask yourselves if this is a case of a respondent wanting to be readmitted and saying he admits things and is rehabilitated, but also consider that he points to not very many concrete actions to rehabilitate himself or any good works done for the community. His counsel pointed to volunteering work that was done on behalf of the profession, but those acts date back to 2002 and 2006, before the misconduct. But with all of those observations, I think that you have a full and complete record before you in order to make a reasoned decision. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Coy, closing remarks.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. We admit that at the first petition that Mr. Cabani did seem resistant to, admitting his involvement in his misconduct. And I think he has amply demonstrated here today in his opening remarks that he understands that upon reflection and living with this day after day for 2.5 years, and thinking about this and contemplating it and doing some self-reflection, that he has come to the realization that he admits fully and takes responsibility. Not only did he not supervise, but he was involved in the misconduct actively. And, so the question becomes, at what point is there enough passage of time, or is there ever enough passage of time for this board to consider reinstating Mr. Cabani to this profession and allowing him to practice in a vocation that has been his life, that he has devoted day in and day out for nearly 30 years. And he's not going to be practicing for another 30 years, but he would like to try to reestablish himself on a gradual basis to recover from this horrible situation that he's in and that he admits he caused. So the rehabilitation can occur not only by admitting and being remorseful and expressing how he feels today about what he did, but also by allowing him, and I think probation with conditions certainly provides enough safeguards for this board to make sure that nothing like this happens again. And certainly he won't be practicing public company accounting, and so that alone reduces the risk. He's not going to have the number of clients. I know at the last hearing he talked about how he had too many clients and was stretched, and it just kind of snowballed on him. Well, he won't find himself in that situation. So I think he has come forward today and spoken from the heart and explained to this board why his view of things has changed because of passage of time, his being able to think about it pretty much endlessly, day after day. And so I think that is sufficient to show that he has expressed contrition, that he has begun, if not completed, is well on the way to rehabilitation, and to a point where, at this point, by the time this board considers it and issues an order, it'd be close to 3 years that he hasn't been able to practice. And I understand this board's need to protect the public. Before I went to law school, I was a CPA. So I fully appreciate personally the responsibility that this board has to the public and to maintain the professionalism and the integrity of this honorable profession. But I think that Mr. Cabani has shown regret, remorse, and is deserving of giving a fresh start and another chance at returning to his profession, which has been his whole life, and not hold against him, albeit a horrendous situation, horrendous conduct, but happened once, right? I'm not minimizing the conduct that he's admitted to and was engaged in, but I think we're in a position where we need to give people a second chance and a fresh start, like you have in bankruptcy, where people are given a new start and a clean slate. And I think with probation and other measures that this board can impose as conditions, as it deems appropriate, that he can be supervised properly and definitely prevent anything like this from happening again with respect to any of his clients or any of his responsibilities to the board or other governing agencies. So with that, I just would encourage the board to sincerely review what he said here today and to request humbly that both of the licenses for Mr. Cabani and for his company be reinstated. Thank you again for your time.
All right, Mr. Takar, matter submitted for the board's consideration.
Yes, Your Honor.
Matter submitted, Mr. Coy.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you for your time.
All right, matter submitted, and the record is closed. We are off the record.
We'll now go into closed session to deliberate on this matter. All right. Back on the record. I like to do that when I adjourn for the day. Back on the record, let's go to item number 10, the report of the licensing chief, Michelle Center. Please, folks.
Thank you. Before I hand the mic over to Sarah, who will be presenting the licensing activity report, I want to take an opportunity to remind members that you were emailed a link to the exposure draft, which is related to the CPA evolution, and it is very lengthy. This is it printed double-sided. We will be taking your feedback on this document in September. So you were provided a link if you want to look at it in electronic version, but we do have some hard copies printed and they are on the back table. So if you want to leave with one of these, that would be great. But in September, we need to be ready to provide our feedback so that we can get it to AICPA and NASBA by the end of the month. So with that, I will hand the mic over to Sarah.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Benedict, and I'm the Licensing, Renewal, and Continuing Competency Manager, and I'm happy to be presenting the Licensing Activity Report, or LAR, to you today. The LAR covers the period of time between July 1st, 2021 and May 31st, 2022. Turning to page 2 of the LAR, we have responded to nearly 118,000 stakeholder inquiries in the form of email and telephone calls. Turning to page 3, the examinations unit has approved just over 17,000 applicants to sit for the CPA exam. The initial licensing unit has approved over 3,000 applications for CPAs and firms. Both units are processing below the 30-day goal. On pages 5 through 7, data related to renewal deficiencies and continuing education audits are displayed. Table 7 includes CE audit data. As of May 31st, 623 of the 755 audits completed in fiscal year 2021 were found to be compliant. 59 of the audits had deficiencies that have been resolved, and 73 of The audits were referred to enforcement for non-compliance.
This is legal, if I may. I just got a note that the webcast still says closed session, so if we could pause till that got fixed for any public members.
Okay.
I am live now. It's probably 10 seconds.
Oh, it is live now?
It's live.
Okay, go ahead.
777 licensees have been selected for audit in fiscal year 21-22. Of those, 618 have been found to be compliant. Table 8 includes population data. As of May 31st, the CBA had a grand total of 1,114,532 licensees, registration, and permits. On page 9, data related to military and refugee, asylee, and special immigrant visa holders are displayed. That concludes my presentation. I will now turn it back over to President Savoy, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Questions? Comments? Thank you very much for the report. Appreciate it. Item number 11. This is, I need approval of minutes, but I want to put this together. I need a motion to adopt the minutes of the May 19th and 20th board meeting, specifically agenda item 11A, which includes non-substantive edits that were noted after the materials were received. And also, can I get a motion to accept the minutes, specifically the agenda items 11B through F, which includes also non-substantive edits that were noted after the materials were received. Anybody? Ms. Lara?
Motion to adopt the minutes?
Adopt one and accept the other, correct?
Yes.
Second, Ms. Salazar. Any discussion on this item? Any comments from Sacramento public? Any comments from any other public? Please open it up.
This is the moderator, and we are opening the Q&A feature of WebEx to facilitate public comment. You can look for the question mark icon in the lower right corner of your computer screen, or you may raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. And I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close the feature?
Yes, please. Ms. Reed, call for the vote.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Christian Lauda?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens?
Yes.
Ariel Pay?
Abstain.
Joseph Rosenbaum?
Abstain.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Yin Tu?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward?
Abstain.
She abstained. The motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 12, other business. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants report on meetings of the AICPA attended by California board members, the Board of Examiners. Ms. Salazar.
Thank you, President Savoy. I will try to keep this brief. Under item A, Board of Examiners, I did attend my first meeting on May 26th. Focus of that was largely the CPA practice analysis update and a review of that exposure draft. So thank you, Ms. Center, for letting folks know that there are copies available for review. That is actually part that it's related to CPA evolution. It looks at how the exam is changing, and it is an important part of the pipeline discussion as we look to make sure that the test is relevant to the profession and attracting people coming in. So I would just reiterate Ms. Center's comment about please take your time to review that, and hopefully we'll have a robust board discussion when it's agendized. The other item for State Board Committee, there was, I attended a meeting June 9th, also virtual. And that meeting focused on exam operation updates, exam content updates, and some of the more operational aspects of the AICPA. So again, that is State Board Committee, and that's also the opportunity for the boards present to go around and talk about the hot topics. And so there weren't any critical ones, but I would just share that I do provide updates about what our board is doing to try to help keep our organization sort of front and center on that in the national conversation. So that concludes the report for AICPA.
Thank you. I see the next item, there's B, no report. B1, also no report. B2, no report. B3, report on activities of meetings of NASBA, attended by you guys again. First, Ms. Salazar on the Continuing Professional Education Committee.
Thank you, President Savoy. So the CPE Standards Working Group, which is a corollary of this committee, I also chair, and that working group has been very active. As I mentioned before, this is a year for the biannual review of both the Statement of Standards of CPE programs as well as the fields of study that qualify for CPE. Those two documents I don't believe have been in front of this board since they were last updated in 2019. So the committee met on June 29th, July 13th, and is scheduled to meet again on July 28th. These are all virtual meetings, which is fantastic for me. But this committee working group continues to be active and will be bringing revised standards to the CPE Education Committee at its next meeting, then to the NASBA board. It also goes to the AICPA since this is a joint project and will ultimately come to this board. So I just want to remind you folks that there will be revisions and to be sure to keep your eye open for those exposures. Thank you.
Thank you. Computer-based Test Administration Committee, Ms. Corrigan.
Yes, thank you, President Savoy. Since the CBA's last meeting in May, the CBT Administration Committee, shortening it, has met 3 times in connection with the Cpa Exam metholution process. As you're gathering from my report and Ms. Salazar, the committees are very, very busy given what's going on in the profession. So they're demanding a lot of us, but it's all good. On or about June 1st, the CBT Administration Committee and the Executive Directors Committee, in a joint effort, which I chaired, met, and at the direction of NASBA powers that be, reviewed, word crafted, et cetera, and issued a recommended policy that the various jurisdictions consider implementing. The issue is concern over CPA candidates being kind of caught in the transition process. They have portions of the exam that they can carry over, and being very fair with them about that. And also at the time of the transition, anticipating that there may be delays in score releases. So the policy reads as follows, and it was issued, and I know Ms. Bowers received it. Any candidate with uniform CPA examination credit or credits on January 1st, 2024 will have such credit or credit extended to June 30th, 2025. So that's for the various jurisdictions to consider, considering their own rules and regulations because they vary all over the board. Now, the goals of these recommendations are to minimize candidate disruption, as I mentioned, and further reduce the impact on the CPA pipeline, support and promote the new CPA evolution model, to minimize changes to state board statutes and rules, that this should be easy to understand, communicate, and implement. But of course, again, that varies by jurisdiction, easier for some than others, right? Hopefully be uniformly accepted by all boards of accountancy, and minimize risk to the public protection. Now, the CBT will continue monitoring the progress and timing of specific events having to do with the rollout of the new CPA exam, timing, issues that will happen, that sort of thing. We also are involved in word
crafting changes to rules and regulations, making suggestions that then go on to, for example, the UAA for consideration and adoption. Next week, there's a joint meeting of my committee and the Standard Setting and Professional Trans Advisory Committee to review the new CPA exam exposure draft. And I believe that this board will be doing that in September. And so with that, that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Next item, no report. And on this topic, last but not least, a report from all three of us, which I don't think we need, of the Western Regional Meeting that was held on June 9th, 7th through 9th. Nancy, you're on a roll. Why don't you give us an update?
I will be very brave and take that challenge. On June 7th, 8th, and 9th, the Western Region meeting was held in Colorado Springs, and at these regional meetings, there was a Western and Eastern. Basically, the regional directors are kind of put in charge and do a lot of important things. So that meeting revolved around new board member orientation, and also we held a mock board meeting so that new members learned exactly how not to conduct a board meeting and all the things we do in here, right? So it was really comical, but a very learning experience. And then we had, during those 3 days, we had our regional breakouts. Mr. Savoy, Ms. Salazar attended, and were very, aided and assisted in the conversation. But key topics had to do with principal place of business and how it is defined. With all the remote workplace, all the changes during COVID and all that, principal place of business has really changed, and let me tell you, it varies by jurisdiction. So education rules that various jurisdictions have and changes that are needed in adapting to CPA evolution. And pipeline issues, always a very important topic, and what some jurisdictions do in the way of outreaches to, outreach to colleges and universities, outreach to exam candidates, other approaches to deal with the shortage of accountants. And finally, CPA exam date of score release versus date candidate sits for the exam. Very different among jurisdictions. There can be quite a time delay from when I sit for an exam to when I get my scores. And so, again, varying and trying to determine the effect on the candidates. So those were the kind of the breakout sessions, which we then reported to the group at large, the participants at large. So other highlights then during the general session, we gave an update of CPA evolution, the exam, the status of it, timing, are we going to meet that January 2024 deadline? Anti-regulation efforts to deregulate licensed professionals, which this board has talked about before. It's kind of an ongoing topic to monitor. Criminal conviction legislation and efforts to clear past records and assist candidates in kind of getting a new start with their licenses. That was another one. Private equity firms acquiring CPA firms and non-CPA ownership of CPA firms, really important topic. Trans and cybersecurity issues, an ever-occurring issue. Coming up, environmental, social, and governance, ESG reporting, climate issues, greenhouse gases, that sort of thing, and disclosures that these companies are going to have to start making. U.S. Department of Labor enhanced study of audit quality and more planned employee benefit plan oversight. Because of issues in the past, things get a little better, they start to slip, and the U.S. Department of Labor will ramp it up again and start looking at more of those. Audits being performed under non-AICPA standards and not CPAs performing them. Asset valuations, some of the ESG items that I mentioned, who's qualified to perform these duties and report on them? It's a gigantic topic. STEM legislation, the educational process, student-centered learning environment. And so we know STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Hopefully, and Mr. Fox referred to it earlier, legislation will pass where accounting can become a part of that, and that will also assist with diversity and pipeline issues. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Ms. Salazar?
No, that was very comprehensive. Thank you.
The only thing I'd like to add is 2.5 out of the 3 days I had this headache, and I never get headaches. And then I realized I was 7,500 feet above sea level, but thank God it was time to go home. But I did get to see Pikes Peak, so I can check that box off. In respect to this or that, a number of members have inquired about the annual meeting. Are we allowed to send multiple, or should you know about it in advance? So I think we ought to research and see how many can go. I know that Nancy and Katrina are there automatically. I certainly want to go. And then if anybody else is interested, we should find out if we're allowed to go.
So the annual meeting is in California, so it doesn't require out-of-state travel approval through the governor's office, but it does require approval through the Department of Consumer Affairs, the director. So what we'll do is we'll send an email out to members, and if you have interest, just reply to that email so I can gather all of the interest, and then we can put together the proposal to the department. So there's some, they typically don't like us to send too many people unnecessarily to one location, because a couple members could go and report back. But there are occasions where on the agenda, they'll have events that are very beneficial, like to new members. And so we can strategize once I see the level of interest, putting the proposal together to try to get the most approvals that I can through the department. So.
Thank you. Moving ahead to item agenda 13, the reports on the committee meetings from today. Let's start off with the Aicpa, Mr. Pei.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The Aicpa met this morning at 9 a.m. We went over the overview of the enforcement process and to the overview of the rules and responsibilities of the Enforcement Advisory Committee. So for number one, the overview of the enforcement process, staff provided an overview of this item, which included key aspects of the investigative process from compliant receipt through imposition of formal discipline. Staff discussed types of complaints received, source of complaints, types of investigations, and types of investigative outcomes. Staff provided an overview regarding one of the most valuable resources in the investigative process is the assistance of the Enforcement Advisory Committee, EAC, especially in their role in reviewing the cases, conducting investigative hearings, IH. Staff provided an overview of disciplinary guidelines, which serve as a model for identifying violations and imposition disciplinary terms, and the application of these terms is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Number two, the overview of the roles and responsibilities of the Enforcement Advisory Committee. Doug Aguilera, CPA Chair, Enforcement Advisory Committee, EAC, presented an overview of roles and responsibilities of the EAC. Chair Aguilera provided information regarding his background and experience, followed by an overview of the EAC's composition and noted the committee's members possesses a wide range of accounting skills and experience. Chair Aguilera discussed the general activities of the committee, including following. The EAC meets 4 to 5 times annually. Each meeting consists of an open session where topics directed by the CBA are discussed, and closed session, during which case files are reviewed and investigative hearings are conducted. Chair Aguilera discussed the value of open and closed case files, provided an opportunity for staff to seek advice and feedback from committee members on open investigations and to receive feedback on investigative actions taken in closed cases. These file reviews have been highly collaborative and give the staff valuable opportunity to pose questions and seek advice and guidance from the committee members on the nature and direction of investigations. Chair Aguilera provided an overview of investigative hearings, including the following. IH are quasi-depositional in nature, include 2 to 3 committee members, a deputy attorney general, the investigator, the licensee, and if requested, the licensee's counsel. The goal of these hearings is to elicit the facts and statements that will be compared to other investigative materials to determine the direction of an investigation. Over the past 2 years, new protocols and practices have been developed to enable these proceedings to be conducted virtually. That's it, Mr. President.
Any questions, comments? There is no action items here, so no need to vote. Thank you for that report. Next item, Chair on the CPC, Ms. Owens.
All right, thank you. So the Committee on Professional Conduct met this morning. We focused on two items. The first is item 2B. Staff provided a presentation to approve legislative proposals for the inclusion in the Sunset Review Report, including amendments to the Business and Professionals Code Section 5096.21 to eliminate the mobility stakeholder group. The next is the Business and Professional Code Section 5070.1 to grant an individual with permanent restricted practice order approval for retired license status. The next one is Business and Professional Code Section 5018 and 5093B1A to remove reference requiring physical mailings to and from the CBA. And the last one is Business and Professional Code Section 5093 and 5094 to update CBA references to educational accreditation agencies consistent with the Code of Federal Regulations. So the CPC recommends the CBA approve the proposed amendments to the Business and Professional Code Sections 5018, 5070.1, 5093, 5093B1A, 5094, and 5096.21, including any additional changes the CBA deems necessary, and direct staff to include it as part of the sunset review process. So this is a fully formed motion and doesn't require a second. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or comments on this motion? Are there any public comments from Sacramento on this motion? Moderator, please open it up to any public comments from anybody else.
This is the moderator. We've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature for public comment. And or you may also raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon at the bottom of your WebEx screen. And I do not see any requests for public comment. I'll close the WebEx Q&A.
Thank you. Ms. Reed, call for a vote.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
I have to abstain.
Christian Lada?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens?
Yes.
Errol Pay?
Yes.
Joseph Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Yen Tu?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, Ms. Owen.
Okay, continue on to B3. The committee engaged in a policy conversation to inform the drafting of a rulemaking package pertaining to early entry for the uniform CPA examination and concurs with the staff recommendation. So the CPC recommends that the CBA direct staff to initiate conversations with the Department of Consumer Affairs Legal Counsel regarding the drafting of a rulemaking package related to early entry to the CPA exam that includes the following. Requirement to submit a certificate of enrollment documenting enrollment, degree conferral or expected conferral date, and courses that are in progress. A requirement to provide transcripts and or foreign credential evaluation documenting completed coursework and degree conferral, if applicable, at the time of early entry application. And last, include the revocation of exam credits for applicants unless they can provide evidence substantiating a reason consistent with acceptable reasons outlined in CCR section 7.1. So this is also a fully formed motion and doesn't require a second. I'll pass it back.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, discussions? Yes, Ms. Lata.
During the CPC meeting, a question was raised about the capacity of the staff to process the transcripts, which the reply was that this is work that's currently being done and just the timing would be different. I just had a question in regards to the certificate of enrollment, since that would be a new part of the process if we still had the staff resources to do that. And that's all.
Thank you. So in terms of the certificate of enrollment, the fact that it has a signature and all of that is not going to take any more time than it would to look at an application. The part of that form that will take a little bit more time is the part that has information on the courses that are in process, which is really no different than when we would look at a transcript. Is it going to take more staff time to implement review of early entry? I can't say it's not. Going to take some additional resources in terms of timing. Luckily, I don't know if this is wood, we have been processing well under our 30-day processing times, and so hopefully that will continue with this, as well as looking at other ways to really streamline and automate our processing. So I don't anticipate the workload being an issue in terms of implementation.
Have you looked at or estimated how much additional work? I know you said you don't think it'll be substantial, but have you guys thought about that?
So what we have thought about is how we can make it automated. And so that's the area that we are focusing on now, and how we might look towards the future is how do we get this along with our other programs that you've seen us transition to online applications. You've seen us do that for our initial exam, initial licensing, and then recently for renewals. Eventually, we want to get this process also into that type of system. That will be what reduces the staff time. I don't anticipate a large degree of work. We have not, let's see, for the first 6 months, we had 350-ish applications for early entry. If that gives you a little bit of a sense of the number that we're talking about.
Thank you. Did I already ask for public comment on this? Yeah, I guess I did. Or didn't I? No, that's a different one. Any other discussion on this? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, any comments from the public in Sacramento? Moderator, please open it up for comments elsewhere.
This is the moderator, and if you'd like to make a comment on the report just given, you can click on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your WebEx screen, or look for the question mark icon, and then in the comment box, click comment and hit send. And I have no requests for public comment.
Thank you. Ms. Reed, call for the vote.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Christian Lada?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens?
Yes.
Ariel Pay?
Yes.
Joseph Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Yen Tu?
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, report from the Legislative Committee. Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you very much. So our first item that I wanted to report on is the California Board of Accountancy 2022 Legislative Tracking Chart, 2022 Legislative Calendar, and considerations for taking positions on legislation. And the title of this is longer than my discussion. It was a written report only, and individuals reviewed that, and there was no action taken, nor was there any discussion. Update, discussion, and possible action on legislation which the California Board of Accountancy has taken a position. At the approval of the Legislative Committee, staff only provided a presentation on Senate Bill 731, as the other bills under the agenda, this agenda item, have had either no amendments or only minor amendments that don't materially impact the CBA's position since the prior CBA meeting. So we had no one wanted to discuss anything, including no public members. But as to Senate Bill 731, that did deserve discussion and resulted in a motion that I'll bring to you. Senate Bill 731, criminal records relief. Assembly Bill 731 would require the Department of Justice to expand the provisions regarding criminal record relief without requiring a petition or motion by a party for that relief, to include an arrest and a conviction of a felony if specified conditions are met. The CBA had previously adopted a watch position on this measure. Staff recommended that the CBA consider changing its position to oppose unless amended. Staff are concerned that this bill would limit CBA's ability to consider financial felony crime convictions for CPA licensure applicants. Specifically, the staff recommends that CBA request the author ensure or amend SB 731 if necessary to enable the CBA to continue its present authority to look at matters beyond the 7-year period that is referenced in Business and Professions Code section 480A1. Staff reported that the bill is currently on the Senate floor for concurrence in Assembly amendments. Ms. Salazar asked if the CBA's revised position will be communicated to the author, and Patrick responded that as soon as the CBA takes formal action, the author's office will be informed of the position change and the reason for the change, and will try to work with the author regarding on any amendments. So the Legislative Committee recommends the CBA change its position to oppose unless amended. This is a fully formed motion and does not require a second. And I will turn this back over to Michael for discussion and a vote.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this matter? Any comments from the public in Sacramento? Yes, I'm sorry. Jason, who? Oh, Ms. Ward.
I do have a question because I've seen this bill with my other board before, and I'm just curious of the reason after 7 years, why do we want to go to a oppose instead of staying on a watch? Just so I can understand more, because I'm more of just a watch still. So I can just understand why go to oppose. I mean, I understand the part you want their background, what they were arrested for, or prison for, but maybe more detail if I can truly understand why should we change it.
Maybe Dominic can shed some light.
So I'll do my best. So the board actually has its own ability to look beyond the 7 years within its own Practice Act. And the expansion of this bill takes the expungement from historically that's just been misdemeanor type crimes to extend it to felonies. And so I think that's the primary issue we're concerned with, is not generally just the expungement of all types of conviction, or a very limited scope of convictions, which was misdemeanors, but is now felony convictions. And the board has within its own Practice Act a section that allows us to look at felony financial crimes that extends beyond the 7 years that would now be adversely impacted by this bill automatically expunging those records, which would no longer allow the board to evaluate those for purposes of licensure.
Thank you, Dominic. I'll assume that was public comment. Moderator, open it up for any public comment in elsewhere.
We have opened up the Q&A section of WebEx for public comment, or another option is to raise your hand by clicking on your hand icon at the bottom of your WebEx screen or behind the 3-dot other options. And I see no request for public comment.
Thank you. Ms. Reed, call for the vote.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Christian Lotta,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens,
Yes.
Ariel Pay,
Yes.
Joseph Rosenbaum,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Yen Tu,
Yes.
and Evangeline Ward.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobson, anything else?
Just that since we're going to apparently be ending today, Rebecca, help on changing my.
Well, we're not finished with the meeting yet.
Well, I'm just saying.
She will. She will.
She will. I'm preemptively saying help with my airline reservations and getting our money back from the hotel.
Yeah, okay. Moving along. So you're finished with your report. Everything else was just written. There was no motion.
I am finished with the report, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are now down to closing business. Item 14. Does anybody have any agenda items for future meetings that they'd like to bring forth at this point? Okay. Any items the public wants to bring forth for future agenda items? Oh, it brings us right to the morning break. That's cute. We're into tomorrow already. Okay. Any other comments, questions? I appreciate everybody's. Moderator, for the last time, open it up for any comments regarding future agenda items for the board.
Certainly. We've opened up the Q&A feature of WebEx for suggestions for topics for future meetings. You may type the word comment in the text box behind the question mark, or you may raise your hand, and each person will have 5 minutes to contribute. And I see no request for public comment.
Thank you. With that, we're closed.